Hello, friends and listeners, and welcome to Get a Cat, Get a Horse.
The gosh darn best nerd culture podcast around.
I'm Will,
And I'm Amani.
and today is episode 21, uh, Top 5 Things Pardue Redux. Sorry, do you remember the, okay,
Really
this is going to
stuck the
be,
landing there, Will.
thank you. Do you remember when we were but wee babes, there was a film series called Hot Shots? There was like a parody of Rambo starring Charlie Sheen.
No.
Okay, well, Hot Shots sequel was called Hot Shots. Ew, that's a much worse movie.
Wow.
Hot Shots Pardue. So now we're
part
like,
two.
Yeah, exactly. Pardue.
Thank you for referencing that thing that I have no emotional connection to.
No problem.
That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I can't defend you in this.
Speaking of referencing things that we each have no emotional connection to, segue, this entire episode is going to be about revisiting our top 5 things of all time from any medium ever, which we recorded as our first minisode way back, episode 4.5. I think that was the only minisode we ever did.
Are you sure? I thought we did like 2.
I don't think so, because I think we did that minisode, and then we started to do more minisodes, and we realized that the minisodes were just maxi-sodes, and we just cut out the news. And we just stuck with that as being a sode. So, like,
cool.
Yeah, the mini and the maxi of our sodes are now no longer relevant. It's just straight soden all the time. Yep.
At this point, I'm just agreeing with whatever you say. Yeah, you're right. It was our only minisode.
Only minisode 4.5. You know, our
first minisode was an hour long.
Yep. And our last episode on Suicide Squad was like 2.5 hours. So
right.
But I have to say, we are now 21 episodes in. That's nearly almost half a year's worth of recording. So congratulations, Amani. I take my hat off to you.
I'm clapping.
My fine lady friend and compatriot in crime, because I feel like we've done a good job bringing the show up to, where we are now and having people care about it, at least tangentially.
I actually listened to that episode. I listened to it in a sporadic kind of a way. I sped through it, made sure I got all the right stuff. I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts, like why you liked the things you liked while I was consuming them. We weren't so bad as baby podcasters.
Baby pods.
Yeah, as baby pods go, we were fairly eloquent. Our microphones were on the whole time.
That's all you can ask. That's really all you can ask.
Yeah, in terms of quality.
Well, that was also with Brent had already given us
a lot of help. Yeah,
a lot of tips and little tricks, because if you listen to episode 1, the audio is pretty gnarly.
Bud, don't do it.
Just don't.
Don't do it.
Don't do it for us. Don't do it for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's not interesting. Yeah. It's bad. All right. But the minisode episode, I agree. I feel like the minisode episode is the one where we first started like figuring out how
format-wise what we were doing.
What we were doing and what was going on with us in our brain spaces.
Exactly.
I'm starting to do that thing you do where you like make some kind of weird like unnecessarily like
strange comment about things. Yep.
Strange like descriptor of our body parts. Yep. You're rubbing off on me.
Yep. I frequently have been told by people that I have bad influences on them in terms of my habits and behaviors.
Maybe you'll start saying, you know what I mean? Like after every sentence, like I do. Maybe we'll start.
Oh yeah, I say that.
I say it all the time.
I'm sure I have a ton of audio tics that I do as well. Actually, people have commented on my YouTube stuff and been like, "Stop clearing your throat so loud. It's blowing up my headphones." Like, oh, sorry. So I try not to do that anymore.
I'm breathing here.
So today, before we get started, I want to do a slight bit of housekeeping, just announcements about the show, because Amani has graciously agreed to be partnering with me in the launch of the Nerd Ventures Patreon, which is going to be happening at the end of this next upcoming week. I'm not sure exactly about the days that I'm going to launch it, but either way, the channel and myself I'm going to be launching a Patreon, and as part of that Patreon, there is a reward tier for anybody who wants to donate to the channel and to the podcast, where you will be able to live stream, live chat, and watch the Get a Cat, Get a Horse podcast recording every week when we do it. We are working out a set schedule for it to be consistent enough for people to, easily, watch it if they so desire. And it should be really fun. I think it'll be great. It's going to change the format of the show a little bit, having a live chat there and sort of taking questions. And I think we'll probably also end up doing like little QA sessions before and after the recordings for people who, are hardcore enough to sit in on that stuff. So just be awares of it. If you like the show and you want to get, on the next level, the whole point of the podcast, as well as my YouTube channel, as well as the Patreon, is I'm just looking for community building, abilities and just ways to get people, who are interested in it even more involved, really, to have like an impact on the show. And don't worry if you do not have any interest in Patreon. All of the episodes will still be available like normal. It's going to be exactly the same. The only difference is if you would like to live record with us or watch the live recording, then that option is available to you. But if not, the podcast still exists in its current form, both video and audio, to anybody who cares to view or listen to it. Any thoughts on that, Amani?
No. You should do the Patreon though. We're
okay.
Poor
it's
as
happening.
Yeah.
It's happening.
It is happening.
So, and we will be
bigger and better.
Right now, the reward tier that I'm thinking about for streaming the podcast is going to be $5 per month, which I think is, and a very equitable amount. Obviously it's more about wanting to support us as creators of podcast content. I'm not trying to sit there and say, oh, you handed me a $5 bill, so here is $5 of content. That is not the goal at all. It's just about supporting and community building. And if you feel the need or the desire to support us at that level, we will welcome you into the live broadcasting community. So right now it's looking like it's going to be a $5 tier for live chatting and watching the podcast recording. And then there's also going to be a $7.50 tier, which is going to be like a combo stream pack with other streaming I'm doing. So that's neither here nor there in terms of like being technical about it, but just wanted to mention it. In the next episode, we will give you more concrete details. And then 2 episodes from now, we will be doing it upright, live streaming for the world to hear and getting all of your guys' opinions and questions into the podcast. So very exciting.
I'm excited.
Should be sweet.
Yeah.
All right. Now that has been clean, swept under the rug. Speaking of which, I was telling Amani I got a swanky new webcam, which also means you can see how messy my couch and shelves are. So I am sorry if that offends anybody. If you are
offended by what?
If you're offended by disorganization, then you might want to.
The most offensive of things.
The most offensive of things. I can think of less offensive things. It's not the least offensive thing. All right, now that we are 10 minutes into this, let's actually get to what we're doing. So would you like to give us a little pitch, Amani, of what we are attempting to accomplish in this episode?
I love pitching things. All right, guys. So minisode 4.5, Will and I both compiled a list, 5 things long. It could be any kind of content that you felt passionate about: music, TV shows, movies, animation, games, video games, comics, books, whatever.
It's almost like all of those things were on this list.
Oh my God, really? So the idea is that if somebody came up to us and said, what are the top 5 best things you have ever seen, watched, listened to, etc., give me that list. What content kind of encapsulates you as a consumer? Will and I took that question, we wrestled with it, we put it in our little brain spaces, as Will would say.
I would say that.
We let it marinate it. We let it marinated in all of our lovely brain juices, and we came on the podcast and we spat out that list with a fury.
Oh man, I am loving this new Amani.
Yeah, I don't know.
Great. This is so
I'm
descriptive.
really tired, guys. I went to bed at like 2.
So descriptive.
I'm hyped on coffee. Not coffee. Not coffee. And so we decided it would be fun if we sort of took each other's lists, we consumed the things, we thought about them, and then we came back and we talked about the things that we liked and disliked. I'm sure there will be a little bit of a disagreement at some point, so drama will ensue. This is like your new soap opera.
Yep.
It's going to be good. Yeah, we're just going to go through each other's lists. I think we're going to do it in the same format where we sort of bounce back and forth. I'll do one, Will does one, so on and so forth. And we're just going to talk about our thoughts, talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, what we prefer to see in content, what we don't. For those of you who've been listening, Will and I have very strong, sometimes opposite opinions on things. So this should be a good podcast. We should get some good discussion about like why things become important to us, as consumers, and how those things are kind of defined by who we are as people. Like that sounds big, and it's going to be. I think this podcast will change your life.
Whoa.
If I can make that claim here.
No promises. There's not a money back.
I will definitely promise you money. Will has so much of it. He's ready to give it away. Patreon.
Patreon, yeah. Nope. No
Will needs you now.
Nope.
Money back guarantee on this podcast.
Nope. Let's not say that. That is not being recorded. But
it is recorded. You heard me say it. We'll definitely will be able to refund you if your lives are not. Okay. Good. I'm glad we said that.
We ran that joke into the ground. All right.
I'm glad you said that, Will. Will said that.
I would recommend right now, if you have not listened to episode 4.5.
What are you doing here?
Yeah.
Why are you here?
Are you, that's a whole nother episode. Do you do things in order? Do you start at the end and work backwards? Like, that's crazy.
Good question. Okay.
So, if you have not seen 4.5 though, or listened to it, there was not video of the podcast back then, just audio, but you can find it on SoundCloud and iTunes. And I would recommend going back and revisiting that one in terms of getting each other's opinions on these things, because largely we had not seen each other's things at that point. Like, I think probably 4 out of 5 of each of ours, like, we hadn't seen it all. So
I was 5 for 5.
Oh, there you go. And I was 4 for 5. So yeah, pretty blank slate impressions on that. So I would go back and check that out if you are interested in this, and then come back and talk to us now. Because
I will say that it's one of my favorite episodes we've ever done. Because that's like my jam, talking to people about what's nerdy and like giving them recommendations and stuff. Like, I love that. I can't help myself. If like I'm watching something, I want to tell everybody about it. So there's something satisfying.
The Consuming Weekly section.
Yeah. It's my favorite.
Yeah, and I think Amani is right that I think one thing I really like about doing the podcast with you is that we are able to talk, I think, pretty well to each other about things that we are both consuming, but we come at them from pretty radically different angles most of the time. So it should be interesting to get into each other's brains a little bit, because I definitely noticed some trends in stuff that you were recommending to me. Like, there were a few trends that I kind of like feel like I associate now with things that you really like, which was interesting.
Yeah, no, you as well. Nihilistic comes to mind, I think, Will, in terms of your personal preferences.
Pretentious.
Niche, what I would say.
Niche. Hey, it's niche.
Maybe not
say like a dirty American.
Niche.
Yeah, so my feeling is that for each of these, we should just have like the other person give like a super brief synopsis of what the thing was, and then they're just, reactions, positive or negative. We can just bounce back and forth talking about how we felt about it. So do you want to kick it off with, we've roughly arranged these, like Amani said, in order of like most to least controversial in terms of discussion versus liking versus whatever.
Right away, guys.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to see it, go down. We're not gonna. We'll make you wait.
It's only like 15 minutes into the podcast.
I mean, we're gonna make you wait in the typical way that we make things wait, and I like to talk for a long time about everything. So.
I enjoy my voice as well. Okay, let's do this.
Do it.
No longer are we holding back. I want to start. Let's start.
Go for it. Yeah, do it.
Okay. The first thing on my list is Eraserhead. Will told me to watch this movie, and then I did it. I regret that
Haunt your
decision.
nightmares.
It is, in fact, a terrible, terrible film. Well made in almost every sense of the word, but it will be haunting me for months. I might say years to come. Eraserhead is about Henry Spencer. I'm literally reading a synopsis because I don't know what this movie's about.
That's the beauty of it.
He tries to survive his industrial environment, his angry girlfriend, and the unbearable screams of his newly born mutant child. That is Eraserhead.
That is Eraserhead.
It is David Lynch's first full-length film, I believe.
It took him 7 years to make.
It took him 7 years to make. He started, and I think he finished it while he was in film school. Whether or not he started it while he was, I'm not sure.
I think he started in film school and then finished it after.
I literally read the Wikipedia page yesterday, and I'm blanking on all the details. David Lynch's first film, it is this sort of creepy, sort of body horror, experimental type thing. It has a lot of very sort of like nihilistic and personal themes. Will, in 4.5, you described it as sort of this like meditation on like being unable to relate to your family and your friends, being scared of fatherhood, this sort of like basically like this weird internal diatribe of like David Lynch's own creation, like him confronting his own sort of demons. It is in black and white. It has sort of this weird ambient soundtrack type thing going on.
Also scored by David Lynch.
Also scored by David Lynch. And I watched it, sort of. I got about, I don't even remember the timestamp, but I got to the part where the lady in the radiator killed the infant.
Okay.
She like stomped it.
That's pretty close to the end, actually. You probably only had like the last 30 minutes.
It
the
was
radiator
exhausting.
lady scene is
This film was so much work emotionally for me. It was beautifully made. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous movie. It looks so good. For me, I think this film was like a really interesting exercise. There were a few things on your list that I had to really try and understand just because they're not my aesthetic, right?
Yeah.
And I've never had to work so hard to try and like get my mind around what something is, because usually you just like what you just watch and consume what you like, right? Because that's the point of consuming. You kind of take in what you enjoy, and that's it. Like there's not a lot of work involved in enjoying something.
I don't know, because I think that's probably part of why I pick these things, as I enjoy the difficulty.
This is my show, Will. Don't talk about what it is to like. No, it's fine. No, you're right. And I think that's one of the things I kind of learned about you. You like the work. You like the effort.
Yeah.
Not just like the cerebral, like I'm engaging in this, but also like now I need to go figure out like when he made it, how he made it, what's the story behind the making of it. I want to know the history of that, and that makes this experience richer. So I had to turn into you, for better or worse, for a couple weeks.
It's a scary headspace.
Oh my God, being you is exhausting. It is so hard. So anyway, I'm watching Eraserhead. I'm jumping back to the Wikipedia page. I'm learning about David Lynch and his wife and how they funded it and how much of a freaking whoa. And the whole time, body horror is not for me.
Okay.
I'm going to say it's not my thing. It's not how I want to see these ideas expressed, or it's how I express these ideas. And while I found all of this stuff, like, especially once I understood where he was coming from, I found it all very relatable and very humanizing in the film. It was really, really tough for me to watch. And I have a pretty high, like I can handle horror. Right.
Yeah,
like,
but it's horror in like a different way. Like you're
very emotionally horrific.
Yes.
It wasn't so much the visuals as understanding where they were coming from and what they were talking about in reality was like really, it was really rough. Trauma
than horror almost.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, that's a really good way of describing it. I'm going to be honest, guys. I couldn't finish it. It was last night. I was like, I'm done. I don't love Will enough for this.
I understand that. It's
And
not that long. It's about an hour and
it's
a
an
half.
hour and
And
a
like I
half.
said, you got probably, I would guess you were like probably an hour in at that point, 40, 50 minutes,
Yeah.
something like that.
Whatever it was, I was at my breaking point.
Mhm,
I'm gonna be
mhm.
real. It's kind of been haunting me. I'm sure I will finish it at some point. I'm sure there'll be a time when I'm like, it's time to revisit Eraserhead. Having said that I couldn't finish it, it's a beautifully made movie. It is
Yeah.
visually, it is really interesting. It's really tight. It has a point of view. It is, considering how long it took him to make it, it's absolutely mind-boggling that it looks as cohesive as it does.
That is pretty
Like,
crazy. I never thought about that actually.
I'm wondering, like, it feels like a movie that they made over like 2 weekends, you know,
Yeah.
and they just did it. It's very low budget, which I'm kind of finding like I like more and more. Like, I like the creator-driven content more and more. So even if it doesn't look quite as clean, there's something that feels very like relatable about it and very
Mhm.
like endearing to me. So I was into that. All the effects were like really cool, like really, really cool. Um, it says it's a 1977 American surrealist body horror film. I don't know if that means they finished it in 1977. I'm
Yeah, I
assuming
believe
that's
that.
what
I
it
believe
means.
that is the case. Yep.
For 77, these effects were on a low budget in 77. A low budget 77 effects were, that's not a good sentence, whatever. You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're
Was
saying.
they were excellent. They were a lot of fun. Psychologically damaging this film was.
Yeah.
A lot of work. I don't really know what to say about it. Other than that, I get why people enjoy it. And I understand why it's like something that people love. I did not love it.
That's
That's
totally
it.
fair. Yeah.
That's what I'm gonna say about Eraserhead. And it
Yeah.
scared me. Spencer, what a freak. I shouldn't use that. That's mean. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely like, I think a theme that's going to come up a lot with the stuff is like you're saying, the struggle of what I enjoy putting into it. And I really like, I've talked
I like how it's like it has its own like it's
thing,
called
the
the
struggle.
struggle. The
Well,
act of consuming.
no, yeah. I mean, that's like, to me, that is like the point of art and stuff. I think we sort of got into this on episode 1. I think we were
We
talking about,
definitely have thought about this
yeah,
before. Yeah.
like, and to me, like, the thing that is most appealing, or I guess personally important to me about art, is kind of having it push you to a place that is like really either uncomfortable or just different, not even necessarily uncomfortable, just like having you experience something that's like totally and wildly outside of what you know. And so yeah,
I
I could
will
see,
say that that place for you is a place that it wasn't like, I think there are different ways you can get people there.
Mhm,
You like the way that is dark and
mhm,
like emotionally not damaging
taxing.
because yeah, it's emotionally taxing. You like to be pushed to a really dark place.
No, for sure, I love
And
that
that's your
dissonance.
vehicle.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's how you like being confronted there.
Yes,
I
yes.
don't like that. And I
Yeah.
think that's interesting because you're gonna talk about like the things that you saw in mine, but I would argue that I like the very like sort of like quixotic, like um not like uplifting, it's not like a religion, but like the idea that we have sort of this like place to go to.
Mhm, mhm.
Do you know what I'm saying? I don't
Yeah.
know if you found that throughout.
No, I did. I definitely did. Absolutely. That's
That's so weird. We're like exactly opposite
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
amazing. You're the yin to my yang, Will.
it's true. That's why we work so well.
You're the Bonnie to my Clyde. I'm
The
totally I'm totally
Aaron to
Clyde.
your Sorkin.
Beautiful moment.
So
Speaking of Aaron Sorkin, someone Will actively dislikes.
I do. So yeah. So Eraserhead. Let's put that one in the
Eraserhead.
books.
Let's leave that
Okay.
behind.
Okay. Well,
Let's move on.
let's cap these all off with. Would you recommend this to somebody?
I would never tell
who did not?
somebody I
Okay.
loved to
Okay.
watch this.
Gotcha. Fair enough.
I definitely, I feel like this is interesting because now I have a new benchmark of like how to read people in terms of like what they enjoy. Do you like Eraserhead? is a
No, yeah,
very good place to start in terms of
true.
figuring out who people are content wise.
I have a couple different benchmarking things like that, like different albums and films where I like to just like throw it out there and see if the person's into that, because if they, it's like if they are, then I can take a discussion in a way that I really enjoy, and if they're not, I might have to like tone down my craziness a little bit. I might not like be able to bite their head off with like the the need of art to provoke like dissonant feelings of morbid dread in them.
That is the most like concise description of your personality.
Yep.
That I've ever heard. Very well done.
I feel like I'm a pretty cheery person.
You are. You're very cheerful while
Strange-
like confronted
strange
with your own
things.
mortality.
Exactly.
And like humanity's imperfection emotionally. Okay, let's move on. Aaron
Let's move
Sorkin.
Aaron Sorkin. So, Amani, this is and I'm not even like, I had an interesting journey with this show. This is Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip.
This is the one that I knew you were going to have the most problems with.
And it is absolutely the one I wrestled with the most.
I'm really excited.
An Aaron Sorkin drama comedy, although
dramedy,
it skewed much more towards drama than comedy.
Agreed.
Considerably. The comedy bits kind of came from like the show within a show, so it's basically like a back scene, behind the scenes, like behind the music kind of deal of running a sketch comedy show on Friday night, which is called Studio 60 on the Sunset Strip, a fictional sketch comedy show, which was weird to me because I thought when it started that it was supposed to be an analog for Saturday Night Live, and that Wes was supposed to be what's his name from SNL, the producer on that, Lorne Michaels. But then as the show unfolded, it turns out that those things also existed in this world, and I thought that was kind of weird. Like I felt like that took a little bit away from it to me, like because the studio that they're working for is NBS instead of NBC, and stuff. So like at first I just thought, oh, okay, this is a direct analog for that. But as the show gets rolling, you learn that like the rest of the world exists. Like the West Wing is even a show in this universe, which was kind of funny to me. So yeah, but basically it
does
is
that frequently where he creates his own Elseworlds for whatever thing he's making. And the way they interact with each other is super weird. Like the newsroom is like that as well. It's like news.
Take place on NBS.
It's a no, it's not. Oh, that would have been so cool if it was.
Cool. So yeah, this is, to give it a summary, like I said, the first episode of the show has the longtime producer of this sketch comedy show, which is kind of fallen on hard times. It is obviously very close analog to like SNL in the mid-aughts. He is feeling pressured by the political and world environment, and that he's compromising his vision of what the show should be to fit in with the network's wishes. And so he goes on the air and gives a very network style rant. If you've seen the film Network, like the I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore, he basically does that. Talks about how America is like a bunch of fucking idiots now, and we are dumbing ourselves down to every blah blah blah. And then he is summarily fired, at which point Matt and Danny, I don't even know, I know Danny Tripp because they say Tripp all the time. I don't know what Matt's last name. Matt Albee, apparently. Matt and Danny, played by Matthew Perry and Bradley Whitford respectively, who were fired from the show 5 years ago. Well, actually they quit, it comes to pass, but were removed from the show 5 years ago, are brought back in now that they are a successful writer-director duo. They're brought back in to be exec producers on this show, and then the series rolls from there as they build the show back up from the ashes of what it was and deal with their lives and their relationships with the cast members and the writers and the studio heads. Is that a pretty fair summary?
Excellently done.
Excellently done. This was probably, I'm trying to look at like what Sorkin has written. Honestly, like, and I've jibbed and jabbed at him over the course of the podcast. Like you've mentioned being into West Wing and stuff a couple times in the consuming episodes and stuff. And I've sort of, talked about like, oh, the walk and talk and blah, 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 blah. And those things. But I think like actually in terms of like really sitting down and consuming stuff, the only thing I had ever seen from him fully that I had really been into was The Social Network.
Which is amazing.
Previous this. Yes, and I really like it.
Yeah.
But I would say that for me personally, my love of The Social Network, I think, is more based around, David Fincher and the construction of that film a little, rather than necessarily like. I think the story is good, definitely, and the dialogue is very Sorkin. Mark Zuckerberg is in some ways like the most Sorkin thing that Sorkin could dream to write about or for. And yeah, so this was my first experience in getting into it, and I have to say, when it started, I was fucking pissed at this show. Like, I hated it. I really fucking hated it. Like,
oh my God,
I'm talking about like
I could totally see you just seething it.
No, I was like,
and you hated them.
No,
like
actually,
I knew you would. I knew you would.
Oh my fucking God! Like episode 3 and 4, I was like, this is actually unwatchable. Like, I can't fucking watch this. Like, it was.
You persevered, Will.
I did. I actually finished this all 22 episodes, which let it be said was
going to
significantly longer of a consumption time than any other period of piece that we would have recommended here.
Sorry,
I think it probably comes out to like 18 hours with like the 40-minute chunks or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But let me tell you why I finished this, because my relationship did change with this over the time. Because, like I said, when I was about 3 or 4 episodes in, I found the show at best like cringy, and I was like, I can't believe they're saying this stuff, and at worst just like scene haltingly terrible, just awful. And I think for me, it's like, oh my God, dude. I mean, I was like,
haltingly terrible.
And I still found that to be true in moments of the later show, but I grew to appreciate it a little bit more. Let me outline a couple of reasons why I really disliked it. The things that I really disliked. 1, these characters don't ever fucking talk to each other. These are not dialogues. These are monologues. When, like, to the extent that they frequently will just talk over and around each other without even understanding what other people are doing. I mean, that's not true all the time. There are some really great character interactions in this, but there are literally moments. I mean, I'm almost saying this word for word, where somebody will walk into an office and Matt has like a bat, and they'll be like, "Oh, nice bat. Where'd you get that from?" And Danny will be like, "Huh, he thinks Moliere is Italian," and then walk out of the room, and they'll be like, "What was that about?" And then he'll be like, "Don't worry about it." And then have some totally non sequitur conversation with this person. And then somebody else will walk in the room, like a third character, and they'll be like, "Oh, nice bat." And the person who just walked in was like, "Yeah, but he thinks Moliere is Italian." And then walk out. And I'm like, oh my fucking God. Holy fucking shit. Nobody talks like this. What the fuck is going on? Like, I was really angry at the dialogue for a while. That was a big like sticking point for me, was that I like the things that they talk about. They're just walking around behind the scenes, like mentioning obscure French playwrights and like one-act Broadway plays and stuff. And I was like, what the hell is this? It just did not make sense to me. So that was a weird thing. But I think the biggest sticking point to me, and I believe that this is true for all of his series, because I know, definitely this is what I've read in reviews about The Newsroom, is that, and so I'm going to go into like college mode real quick here. When I was in college studying history, you start to get into like the methods of the way people write about history. Like as you get deeper into it, it's not just reading the historical pieces, it's reading about how other historians have written about history. And I find myself personally to be very much concerned with social and cultural histories, like broad survey histories of kind of many people. However, there's a strain of historians who, and this was a dominant thing for a long time, who mostly wrote about, individual people, biographies on Napoleon and the founding fathers and things like that. And this sort of creates this conflict between the two schools of historical thought. And it's brought up this idea of a great man theory, which like Great Man Theory is something that's used to criticize historians often who write only about how Napoleon had this huge impact on France, and they're just going to write about Napoleon, but they're not going to look at like how many people were sick that year in France and how many people, what they were watching and listening to. Obviously they didn't have TVs, but like, a much more like social broad survey thing. And I really feel like I would level that criticism against Sorkin, is that it feels to me when I'm watching his stuff that just like 5 powerful rich people are like somehow solving all the problems of the fucking world behind some like glass, container, while they're just like standing around talking bullshit to each other. Like constantly it's brought up about like how we're fighting the culture war here, and like nobody exists outside the bubble of NBS in this show to do anything but be consumers of the show. Like there's never moments when you see like the world or what it's actually like, and it just feels to me, I got very frustrated by Matt thinking that by writing some sketch he's gonna like save the world, or like how important these things appear to them to be, and how like life-shattering to the world and to the political climate and to the religious climate all of these sketches are. Like I just felt, to me personally, that was really off base. I was like, do you ever watch Saturday Night Live? Do you know how many people like care or like how big of a deal it is to anybody? Like it just felt really weird to me, the importance and the like extreme what's the word I'm looking for? Oh my god, I'm totally blanking.
Arrogance?
Not even that. It's more like agency. Like it feels like in these words of in these Sorkin worlds, that the only people with agency in the world are like, the guy who's hosting the newsroom and the people in Studio 60. Like they have the agency to do all of these things in the world, and the world changes and molds around them, but that the world does not exist as like a real place outside of that bubble. I don't know if that makes sense. That was just like, that was my feeling oftentimes, and like the criticism that I would most strongly level against that. Now, do you want to say anything before I keep going?
No, I think that like the closer we got to this podcast, the more I thought about what you would think about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And my relationship with Sorkin has sort of changed over the last 6 months. I listened to like what I said about the show. And really, I could have chose any Sorkin thing.
I was
just
actually
wanted
going to ask you that. Why did you not choose like West Wing?
I chose it because it was insular, and because it was it was the highest quality, least amount of stuff besides like The Social Network.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I like Sorkin TV shows, which are a different beast than his movies.
Okay,
because
yes.
when Sorkin's given long format, he sort of just does whatever he wants, And he has said before, he doesn't really plot out seasons. He goes like maybe 4 or 5 episodes ahead, and things just sort of like spring up.
That makes. I mean, that feels like that in this. They're kind of arcs rather than like a full season thing.
Basically, I understand what you're saying about Sorkin in terms of like why that bothers you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that's one of the things I like about.
Yeah.
Like I like the idea of somebody being like, what I contribute is really important, and not everybody's going to think that. But that's okay. Like I'm still allowed to be like as engaged as I want,
Yeah. And actually, I think that that's a through line that carries through to East of West a little bit, which we're going to get to. Like I actually felt a lot of
a Manny style.
No, I really did. Like where it's kind of like this small group of like important people who, are in charge or in some way involved in shepherding and guiding the world around them. Like I really felt like there were a lot of similarities actually between them. But what changed for me about Studio 60 is that some of the characters really began to grow on me, and I think were great. And then some of the characters did not. First off, Harriet Hughes is like one of the worst characters. I hate her so much. I mean, full disclosure, I have little time or interest in religion at all. And it just felt to me like her character never progressed outside of that. Like after the second episode, I just knew exactly what she was going to say in every instance. And I just was very frustrated with her as a character. Like even there's sort of hints of it at the end, like at the very end when she's in the hospital chapel with Danny, and he's like, I can't be here. Like, what about all these things? What about all these problems? And then she's kind of like, she like turns to God or whatever, and she's like, he's bringing up some good points. Like she literally says that, and I guess that was all right in her development, but it took 20 episodes to get there, and like every episode in between that, I just knew what she was gonna do and say, and so I
Can I
had
jump in
little
on
interest
that?
in her. Oh yeah, absolutely.
I feel like that's sort of a theme throughout. Is Aaron tries really hard to bring in views that aren't his own. He
Mm.
tries to write Republicans. He tries to write religious
It
people.
falls weird, dude.
He's not the best at it, and that's definitely like those are thoughts I've had.
No, I
love
very agree
I
with that.
love Harriet though.
Okay.
I'm into this
You're a
idea of,
Harry supporter.
well, I think also like somebody who wants to create stuff, like seeing somebody try and make a character that's so opposite from them is just fascinating, but I understand why you don't like her.
Yes, I did not care for her. I also did not care for Simon at all. I really felt his character was botched and strange. Simon's played by DL Hughley. I don't know how you say his name. But he is like the premier Black cast member on Studio 60, and a lot of his arc has to do with him and this writer that they hire, whose name is, oh my god, I'm totally blanking on that again. Darius. They hire this writer named Darius to bring like quote unquote more African American views into the show and the writing of the show. I think it's a good idea, and I liked the episode where they hired Darius and they're kind of like show the disparity between Black comics and like some, or any type of comic, whether you're a Black comic or a gay comic or a fat comic or a skinny comic, there's comedy that's funny because you are a funny person and then you like use those aspects of your life as jokes, and then there's comedians who are not really funny and they literally just play on like, here's a bunch of stereotypes. Do you know what I'm saying? And I felt like Darius I like Darius as a character and his struggle of kind of like wanting to be in the writer's room, but then Simon like throws him stuff and he's like, work on this sketch with me about Black people, and Darius is like, no man, like I don't want to be stuck into that mold of just writing for you and only writing for like a Black audience.
The Black characters.
Yeah, and I liked that. I liked what Darius brought to that, but I really felt like, I don't know, that just didn't work for me. Like when he gets into the whole racial stuff and he's talking about like, I don't know. That was a character that I did not care for. Matt, I was on the edge with. Sometimes I liked him, sometimes I didn't. I felt like he was not a character that I was like super in love with, or I don't feel like he changed that much again, like through the course of the series. But characters I did like, I really liked Jack. Jack Rudolph.
No, you're right, Rudolph.
Yes,
I was gonna say Warner.
I really liked him a lot. I thought his arc was very good. His like as a character, his development was good. He is the chairman of NBS, and you kind of see him go from like, when you first meet him, you don't really understand what he's all about, and you think he's just kind of just there for business and money and stuff. And then as things progress and he's kind of put in these trying situations, he reveals that he is much more sympathetic to the problems that the cast members and the showrunners are having, and that he really does have some struggles with like the morality of what he feels he needs to do versus what he as just a person wants to do, not as an executive. And then lastly, I loved Danny and Jordan, like stupidly. Like, I mean, this is gonna sound cheesy, but like that was the best romance I think I've seen on television. Like, honestly, and I don't know why. I'm not sure why, if it hit me, why it hit me in one place or whatever, but like when they were going through the last like arc of kind of like her baby being born and him proposing to her, I was like tearing up. I was like, this is for real. I really liked it. I
can't believe the saving grace of this show for you was the romance.
It was. But I think like the romance.
I love that. Oh my god,
the romance aspect of it was so strong to me because it showed Danny and Jordan's character evolution. Like that's what I'm really getting down to, is I feel like the characters that worked to me, like I did feel like they were changing and evolving over the course of it. And the characters that didn't work to me, like I knew from episode 2 what they were going to say every time, like. And
Yeah,
I
let me jump in on
yeah,
that because I think that's
absolutely,
an
please.
interesting thing to say about Sorkin is this idea that like sometimes I think that the argument you were talking about between the writer and I'm forgetting his name, Darius and Simon.
Simon, yeah.
Sometimes Sorkin wants to talk about something.
And he just
And his characters, yeah, and his characters end up talking about it.
Yeah.
And it'll like come out of nowhere. And it's not necessarily about the characters anymore. It's just about Sorkin framing
on the head with the idea.
Yeah, he's framing a debate, right?
Yes.
Because it's something he's interested in. Maybe he heard about it or wrote about it. And this idea that Sorkin doesn't really like arc out seasons, he just kind of writes what he feels, can be to his detriment in terms of like traditional storytelling structure. And I definitely feel like Sorkin kind of has this Shakespearean quality where if you break down Shakespeare's work, it does a lot of the same things where they're not really talking to each other. They're talking at each other, and they're just talking beautifully, know? I think you can make that argument about Shakespeare, at least some of his work, A lot of it is very emotionally relevant and very deep. I don't want to get into an argument with anybody about how good of a writer Shakespeare is, but I feel like Sorkin is kind of the equivalent of Shakespeare in our times, where he's sort of like a master of dialogue, and he lets that sort of carry him through like his shows, especially like the longer format stuff. Would you agree with that? Like that's sort of a thing I've had to like deal with emotionally. That's sort of
I agree with the first part of what you said. I agree with the second part a little less. I don't think he's like necessarily a master of dialogue. I think he is a master.
I totally disagree. He's amazing. You're wrong.
I think he's like, if that's the kind of dialogue you like, because like for me, when I think of a master of dialogue, I think of Tarantino or somebody where it's just incidental things that are said that give me insights about the character and like things that are not necessarily always there to progress the plot of what's going on, but are like amazing dialogue insights. Whereas I feel like that doesn't happen in Sorkin stuff. It's just like people stand and deliver what they need to get the next like conversation point going, but there's not a lot of incidentals to flesh anything out. So like it totally depends on what you like in dialogue. Ultimately is what it comes down to.
I will say that Tarantino loves Aaron Sorkin. I've watched interviews. He's watched The Newsroom like 16 times. He's in love with Sorkin as a screenwriter. Aaron Sorkin is Tarantino's favorite screenwriter. He said that. That's real. Wow, and I think that's funny because like Tarantino is Sorkin with I feel like Tarantino is Sorkin with plot.
Interesting. I need to think about that more.
Think about it. I'm letting it lay.
Well, either way, I don't know if I'm okay. So maybe Tarantino's not the best example. My point is that there are often dialogue that I prefer. The dialogue is sort of tends to be more, like I said, seemingly throwaway, but in actuality revealing something about a character.
Chinatown has a lot of that, which is another thing on your list. Exactly. I made that note.
And I like that. I like that as something that develops things that are not, necessarily like that. Whereas, and I made a note because East of West, I think, also has the same problem. Where to me, what I consider a problem, where nobody says anything that's not like directly related to the prophecy and what's going on. We'll get there eventually.
Yeah.
But no, I liked it. So do you like the Danny and Jordan thing, or is that not?
Danny and Jordan is my favorite part of that show.
Dude, oh my God, relationship goals. Holy fucking shit.
Yeah. Bradley Whitford especially.
Oh, he is so
good. They're both great. They're both great.
Yeah, I wasn't actress who plays Jordan with Amanda Peet. I didn't really know her that well, but she's really good.
Phenomenal. She spits out that Sorkin dialogue like
she does. Boss. She does a good job of carrying it.
She holds everything in there really, really well. And the way that they are together, like on screen, is just like you're right. It's magical. It's so good.
It just really feels like. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't watched a chemistry between there are things in movies and television where you see a chemistry between characters, and like obviously they are attractive together or whatever you want to call it. So they have chemistry, but the chemistry that they have on this is less like movie or TV chemistry and more just like real fucking life chemistry. Like just being able to sit down next to each other and like take a nap on somebody's lap and like just have a shot of Bradley Whitford just like sitting there looking like the most loving, protective person, but like I don't know, it just worked for me. It just worked like extremely well.
And
Um,
it
and
you
it took a
rarely
while to
get
get
to
to that.
see,
It took
yeah.
slogging through some stuff for me.
But also, like, you rarely see characters just be together.
Exactly.
You know,
And so
it's
what
always
he
about the will they, won't they.
Yeah, exactly.
Just
That
so
that was
annoying.
really nice,
I
is that
hate
there's not
that.
like, because even when and that was frustrating to me about the Harry and Matt thing, is that as Harry and Matt, like, it's just like, oh, they broke up, blah blah blah, blah. She's with that guy, blah blah blah. He's with Jeannie, blah blah. I was like, okay, I've had enough of that. Whereas with Danny and Jordan, like, when they get together, sometimes they still fight, and like some of the fights, I was like, oh man, what's gonna go on? And then they'll kind of leave each other, and they'll be like, and she'll just be like, oh, like, yeah, we had a fight, but that doesn't change, like, that we have a really truly deep affection underneath that, like, that it doesn't, the incidental stuff, like, doesn't matter. It's not a will they won't they, it's just like, yes, clearly they are, and they just have to work some stuff out around that. I really enjoyed that.
One of my favorite scenes from that show is when Danny goes to the OBGYN with her the first time.
Yeah, that was
Like
good.
that weird conversation between the two of them and the doctor.
Yeah,
Like, I love that stuff where it's this idea that like people have their own lives, and like bringing somebody else into your life and all of your stuff is like so complicated.
it is.
And so like messy and weird, and like doesn't make a lot of sense. And I don't know, like I agree with you. I think that's one of the strongest written arcs in the show. And it's
Yeah.
interesting that that's what you like held on to. That's
Yeah.
like the thing you
I
most
don't know, because
enjoyed.
like when it got to like the religion stuff and the war stuff, like, I don't know, it just rang hollow to me. Like, it just felt like, so for example, Cal I had like a weird relationship with. He's the like actual director of the show, like in terms of like, directing the camera movements and stuff. And sometimes I really liked him, and then sometimes I felt he was just like a spout for stupid dialogue. Like when there was the episode about the older man, like Eli Wallach, who comes in and stuff, and Cal's like, "Oh yeah, I'm a bit of a World War II buff," and then he's like, just says like fucking like a whole essay on this guy's particular battalion and stuff. I was like, dude, like, this is so dumb. Or then they come in and they're like, oh yeah, we're working with Trask Company, whatever, and he's like, oh yeah, KNR, they're very active in South America. And I was like, why do you know any of this? Like, you're just this weird mouthpiece to like spout out stuff. I don't know, that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I would recommend watching this. I would.
You sound so sad when you said
I don't know.
that.
Like, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Like, I would recommend watching it, but I would say if you have similar tastes to me, there might be whole sections or episodes that are like really gonna push you, and that you might like even want to skip. Like when it gets, too political and too much about like solving, the religious crisis in America by writing some shit on a piece of paper. Like, to me, that just falls really flat. But especially when you get like past episode 10 or so, I think it really starts to pick up in a meaningful way. So I don't know.
We should at the end
would
of this
recommend it.
describe each other as like people, like what we like in terms of content.
Okay.
'Cause I feel like that'd be interesting.
Let me mention, we've been recording for a while. Now, having said that, I think the ones that we just talked about are probably the ones that are going to have the most
conversation about. Yeah.
So just keeping that
For the
in
most
mind.
part, I have positive things to say about all the others.
Yes, as do I. So I'm just saying, like, keeping that in mind, let's keep moving
speed
on.
on through these.
Speed on through. I did,
Okay.
I did enjoy Studio 60. I thank you for making me sit down and watch Sorkin, because honestly, I have a better understanding of what it is that he does.
Would
and
you
it gave
watch
me
other stuff of his? Would you try more stuff?
I would try the Newsroom. I don't think so. I don't think I could do the Newsroom, because from what I understand of the Newsroom, it is mostly the stuff I dislike. Like, it's mostly the guy getting in front of audiences and just like monologuing about, his stuff. So I don't know. That I'm not sure. West Wing,
I feel like the Newsroom does the stuff that you were annoyed with better.
Okay.
Those are Sorkin's like that's a Sorkin thing to do. That's what Sorkin wants to do.
Exactly.
He wants
and like
to frame a debate.
That's not what I liked about this show.
Yeah.
I would be more interested in West Wing because
This one's pretty boss.
I feel like I could identify with the characters more because I've watched like I don't know probably a handful of West Wing episodes, and I do like the characters in that a little more. I think what I would need to do is like basically watch the first like 4 episodes of each of his other shows, and then sort of be like, am I going to care about these characters or are they just going to annoy me? Because like that's really the make or break for me with this Sorkin thing is like, you know, are there characters I can latch onto, or is it just going to be all, you know, Harriets and Simons? Like, I am a paragon of religion. I am a paragon of race. Watch us talk. Like, I can't do that stuff. I can't do that for a whole series. But it gave me a very good, I think this was extremely helpful in having me understand the kind of thing that you like, and especially with East of West, like I was saying, I think there's actually a surprising amount of parallels to be drawn with East of West. Yeah. And so when I was reading and watching that, I was like, okay, I sort of understand that you are more about like the expression of these big picture ideals and stories, and characters being more like you were saying about ideals of what we could be, or kind of like characters more being paragons and less like quote unquote real life people, which is just a very different, and I am very different,
totally opposite from that. You like to have a magnifying glass. You like to have a scalpel taken to your heart and soul on like an individual level.
Exactly.
And for the artist to be like, you're gross.
Yes.
Like,
yes.
You're a gross.
And so yeah, I think this was like extremely helpful in just letting me understand that about, you know, what stuff you're into. So
okay. Yeah, that's amazing. I'm gonna take control right now.
Absolutely do.
The next thing on your list was, or the next thing for me on your list was White Light, White Heat, an album by the Velvet Underground. It is their third album, I believe, from what the Wikipedia page is telling me. It's their second album, I believe, from what Will just told me.
Yep, it's the second.
It is the album after they fired Andy Warhol, I think.
It was weird. He wasn't like necessarily in the band, but they were like very much associated with like the factory scene in like New York, or with the first band. And Nico was on the first one, who was like a I think German like singer.
I didn't listen to any of that. I listened to White Light, White Heat because that's what you told me to listen to.
Yep.
It is sort of their scene now is like a huge contributor to grunge pop, like underground. I don't even know what it is.
The birth of indie music. I mean,
the birth of indie music started with this album, guys. You heard it here.
I would say.
Music historian that I am. Now, just a quick disclaimer. I have said before, sort of mysteriously on this podcast, I have a different kind of relationship with music than most people do. I don't know if I'm going to explain that relationship. It would take far too long to right now, but I don't listen to music in terms of like, oh, this is something an artist created. I'm going to listen to it and dissect it and hear what they're trying to tell me. I project my own stuff onto music and use music as a tool to help me write, to help me think of story. Basically, music is like a soundtrack to whatever it is I'm trying to figure out story-wise that's going on in my life.
Well, I think that's interesting too, because we talked, I don't think we recorded this. I think we talked about this after we stopped recording.
We did.
But when Ethan was on the show last time, we talked about different music artists. And one thing I found was interesting was that you were very into the music video aspect of it and putting story and visual to it. Whereas like I have basically no interest in that and just want it from like a pure sound perspective.
Hey, if somebody makes a good music video, I'm all about that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, is that like that's I think speaks to what you're saying of like visualizing and creating story and meaning out of music for you is more like where you take it.
Yes, definitely. So I listened to the whole album. I listened to it on Spotify. I have all the songs here in front of me and little notes next to each of them. I'm just going to quickly kind of take a little brain journey
down memory lane.
Yeah, a little brain journey for you. First song, White Light, White Heat. I was like, Beatles vibe. And then I looked it up. They were contemporaries. Of course, it sounds like the Beatles. Like, I'm such a moron. Makes sense. I said I liked it. That's all I have to say about that.
Ringing endorsement. I liked it.
Yes, I would listen to that song. The Gift. Wow. So well written and wrong and strange. I like it.
Love that.
Question mark. I don't think I will ever listen to it again.
You know what's funny is with that song, it's a story song and it's actually panned hard left and right, the music and the words. So if you like take one headphone out, you could hear just
Yes.
with the words, and if you take the other headphone out, you could hear just the instrumentals, which is really interesting.
As performances of short stories go, it was phenomenally done.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It is so good. It is a beautifully written short story about this guy who basically mails himself to his girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Will likes horrifying things. You have been warned about the gift. The music was a great counterpoint to it. The guy reading it delivered it in the best way possible. I will never listen to it again, Will.
That's fair.
I would recommend it to people, though.
I believe it's narrated by John Cale. Yeah, so John Cale was like the most avant-garde member of the Velvet Underground.
Definitely. He wrote it, didn't he?
Yeah, and he wrote and he read this. And so this was actually their last album with him. So like it kind of was at the breaking point of like mashing up with Lou Reed's more, you know, pop-oriented stuff and John Cale's like way left field stuff, you know?
Mm-hmm. So the next song is Lady Godiva's Operation. I started out really liking it. I liked the atmospheric nature of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then when they started talking, like 2/3 of the way through at the end, I couldn't help but laugh. Maybe it's because I've been listening to a lot of Acquisitions Incorporated, that D&D podcast I was telling you about.
Yeah.
Will Wheaton is on that podcast, and the guy talking sounded so much like Will Wheaton that I just felt like Will Wheaton was randomly just interjecting himself into the Velvet Underground. And I was like, I can't take this seriously. Like, I'm out. But the ending of that was like really crazy for me. There's a quote by Sterling Morrison, who's the guitarist, about this album. He said, "The album is fuzzy and there's all this white noise. We wanted to do something electronic and energetic. We had the energy in the electronics, but we didn't know it couldn't be recorded. What we were trying to do is really fry the tracks." And I feel like Lady Godiva and then Sister Ray, both of those are like that. If you don't understand that that's what they're doing, like it's so like, what, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I, having known that and listening to it, it was interesting. It was like an interesting thing to listen to, like an experimental type thing. I don't know if I would ever just like turn it on and be like, this is for pleasure. This is what I'm experiencing. But it was interesting seeing people kind of break down music in that way, especially because I'm so like not learned in this medium, like being like, oh, this is what experimentation looks like, especially for indie rock, like was kind of fun. Lady Godiva kind of like exemplifies that idea, or at least for me, it was the first real like musically we're experimenting here. Like the gift is an experiment, but it didn't feel like a music experiment. It just felt like a short story that was well performed. Lady Godiva was like, okay, here we are, we're experimenting. This is what you're in for. Here she comes now. I said I had little to say about this. Weirdly meditative.
I agree. I don't have that much to say about that one either. I don't think that's a particularly
weirdly meditative. I liked it in spite of myself. That's what I said. Kind of forgettable. I hear her call my name.
I love that song.
Blown away by guitar. And then at the end, like the lead vocalist has like a stroke, like in the song. And then the end, like the guitar at the end was like, holy shit, it was so good. Sterling Morrison, you are a boss.
I actually don't know if Lou, did he play lead guitar though?
Who cares at this point? I'm just complimenting people. You're a boss even if you didn't play this guitar. But especially in I Hear Her Call My Name, the guitar gets like, there are several songs throughout this where the guitar gets highlighted. I think Sister Ray has a lot of guitar stuff too, if I'm remembering correctly. But for me, I liked this the best. Like out of all of the guitar riffs, this was like the part where it was like, this is the guitar song. Everybody else is just kind of along for the ride. Okay, Sister Ray. It was that 14-minute song. It's the B-side.
17 minutes and 28 seconds.
17 minutes and 28-second song. I listened to a 14-minute version of it.
Oh, really? Interesting.
I don't know if I listened to the wrong version or
I don't know. It's probably, I mean, the Velvet Underground stuff has been reissued and repackaged so many times that, like, who knows? It's the same. I mean, you know, after 14 minutes, you probably understand what it's about.
Yeah. So I was really digging it, and then the 5-minute mark hit, and everything lost all context.
Yeah.
I get that the song is supposed to be this guy's acid trip. Like reading the lyrics, it made total sense that he's talking about drug use, right? And I feel like it was so obvious once you read the lyrics, like what this was. And that worked for me. Like I got it. And I felt like what they were trying to do, they did exceptionally well. Like as acid trip songs go, they nailed it. I can appreciate the fact that they did what they set out to do, not for me. Do you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like I don't ever there's never a point in my life when I have been like, man, I really wish I could listen to an acid trip right now. Like so I don't know. It like in a lot of this it didn't like offend me. I wasn't mad at it. I listened to the whole thing and understood what they were doing and appreciated their skill. Not my song. Not my
Yeah.
song.
Lou Reed actually has like a quote about it, like, so according to him, the lyrics are about a bunch of drag queens taking sailors home with them, shooting up on smack, and having an orgy while police appear. There are 8 characters in the story. Somebody gets killed and nobody does anything. And like he kind of wanted to write it as like this Last Days of Rome, like debaucherous craziness song.
Mm-hmm.
So
I felt like it was an acid trip.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's about shooting up heroin, so
yeah, I liked it.
And that's the thing about Velvet Underground
in terms
is like
of being able to understand what it was about.
Yeah, Velvet Underground is a funny band because it's like at the same time the Beatles were like doing acid and becoming lovey-dovey. It was like Lou Reed and John Cale were over in the corner like fucking getting addicted to heroin and like descending into like madness. So it's kind of like these weird alternating like pillars of drug use like, of the 60s.
You know how they have like a Justice League Dark? This was like,
that for the Beatles.
This is like the Beatles gone rogue kind of feel to it.
It is like that.
Okay, so after Sister Ray, the album took a big swing up. Like I enjoyed.
That's the end of the record.
There was what I got. There were a lot of extra songs.
Yeah,
that I
Sister,
guess
like in terms of the record that I would say and use and I know, Sister Ray is the last song.
I'm going to continue on because this is the stuff that I liked. So don't take that from me.
I will not. I just don't know it actually.
You haven't heard I Heard Her Call My Name?
I have heard that, but I've heard that on a different track.
Yes.
Oh no, I Heard Her Call My Name was before Sister Ray.
Maybe they're in like
that's
a different
the alternate.
order.
That's the alternate take. Okay.
Yeah. And it says I Heard Her Call My Name alternate. It felt like it started in the middle of a song. I kind of like that. That's all I had to say. I Guess I'm Falling in Love, which was purely instrumental. It was absolutely gorgeous. And I said favorite thing on the album, but then the next song was my new favorite thing after I listened to it, which was Temptation Inside Your Heart. Have you listened to that song?
I actually have not. I should go back and listen to these.
It's way more mainstream than any of the other stuff.
So I would say, like, based off what you're telling me you like on this, I would be interested to hear what you think about like either their first record, the one with Nico, or especially their third record, the Velvet Underground, because it's the self-titled one. Like, they are not nearly as experimental and like difficult as White Light, White Heat, but it has that kind of beauty of like a poppy song that Lou Reed can write when he's in like the right place. So I feel like you might really dig those a lot more.
Have you listened to Temptation Inside Your Heart? Stephanie Says. Have you listened to either of those?
Stephanie Says is on other records as well. I've heard that one.
Yeah, Stephanie Says was my favorite thing. I thought it was eerie and gorgeous. The lyrics were sort of like weirdly like meditative and like this sort of like, it felt like a broken heart was being served to me.
So you need to listen to, if you like that. I'm not saying you need to listen to.
I loved it. I loved it.
You really need to listen to the 1969, their third record, which is the self-titled Velvet Underground, because that is like a whole record of that. It's all like very meditative, floaty, pretty, but like kind of sad. It like that's whole record is that.
Yeah. And then on the alternate side, Temptation Inside Your Heart was kind of like fun. Like I know it's not like they don't really write lyrics that are positive, but they were talking throughout it, but it was consistent from the beginning. So I felt like they were like, this is what we're doing. And I think in other tracks on White Light, White Heat, they like the experimentation kind of came out of nowhere, like for me a little bit, and that felt jarring. I liked the experimentation when it was consistent. And when I felt like they were like, this is a thesis of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Like, so in terms of like, would I recommend it to people? I don't usually recommend music to people because I don't listen to music in the same way as people do. So there's not really kind of a point for me to do that. Velvet Underground was really cool. It was really interesting. I enjoyed it. I've never had to work so hard to understand music and where music was coming from. I've never really taken it from the point of like, from the perspective of like, this is what the creators are trying to communicate. It was good. It was interesting. I liked that. I like that I can like go through and be like, I like this, I don't like this, I like this, I don't like this, you know, and kind of like make those distinctions for myself in terms of like sound noises that I enjoy.
Sound noises.
Yeah, I'm turning into you.
I know you are.
I don't really have a concise like end encapsulating thing. For the most part, I thought it was a very positive experience for me.
Nice. I'm glad. I'm pleasantly surprised by that.
The Dark Beatles work is what I'm
It is.
saying.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think that's a cool parallel to draw, where it's like psychedelic and drug music went in two different directions, and you know, the Velvet Underground really started that indie alternative, like you were saying, examining
if you're
things
into this era of music and you like the Beatles and you've never listened to the Velvet Underground, then you definitely need to. Like it definitely is a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
So.
And there's a very famous quote. I think I probably said this in episode 4.5 that like 500 people bought their first album, but every one of them went out and started a band. Yeah, like they're that kind of band. It's like
they are.
Maybe not as many people have heard of them, but like it has a great impact on the people that do. Usually, like it means something to them.
I don't know if I'm going to start a band, but I definitely am glad I listened to the Velvet Underground.
Well, you didn't buy their first record, you know.
I didn't buy it. I didn't.
There you go.
Okay, what do you have next?
I have Journey next.
Ooh.
Journey's tough for me because I honestly don't have that much to say about it, because I think I came at it from a very different angle than you did. So Journey is a wordless, mostly directionless exploration video game released originally on PlayStation 3. I played it on PlayStation 4 in like the remastered edition, but I can't imagine it's any different, really. Just probably like smoother. It is a game where you play a nameless cloaked wanderer in a desert as you go on a journey. I mean, I really can't say that much without spoiling. Like,
don't spoil it too. It's not worth it.
Yeah, it's weird. It's not even like spoiling so much, because I could tell you like, oh, at one point you meet a giant cloth monster in like this crazy like pool of light, but that doesn't mean anything. Like it doesn't mean anything unless you see it or play it. The reason sorry. Oh god.
Don't die. We need to finish this.
Let's do it. Okay. I got it. Oh god. Now, I understand that you are not like that much of a gamer, correct?
Ooh, not at all.
Not at all. So you probably play games or enjoy games which are very what I would call like experiential from an artistic perspective.
And cinematic.
Yes. Whereas though I do enjoy a lot of games like that, I am somebody who has grown up playing games a lot. I mean, a whole lot. Like I can't think of probably any time in my life a span of more than like 2 weeks in which I didn't play video games at all. Like I've always played. I mean, obviously when I was a baby.
Since the day you were born.
Since the day I was born. No. But since, I don't know, I got my Super Nintendo back in the day when I was like 6 or 7 or whatever, it's just always been a big part of my life. Always. And because of that, I think like at this point now, you know, almost 20 years on from that, you know, somewhere like 15 years on, whatever, 16, I like am somebody who places a lot of importance on the mechanics of a game, and like having, even if it is experiential and cinematic, having something being mechanically interesting, you know. And I'm kind of like annoying about that, I feel like, in the sense, you know, like when somebody knows a medium so well, it's like you were saying with movies. Sometimes it's hard to just sit down and watch a movie without picking it apart.
Completely.
It kind of felt,
shreds, yeah.
It kind of, to me, felt like Journey was like that. Like if I sort of had wished that I was able to wipe my knowledge of what video games were like in the way that they like controlled and stuff, and I wish that I had been able to come at it from a fresher perspective, because I feel like coming at it from where I did, I was like, oh, this is cool. I see what they're doing. You know, I'm liking some of what they're doing, but as like a game from a gameplay perspective, it was lacking to me in what I wanted to get out of it. And I know that that's not the intent of it. Like, it was not intended to be a dexterity testing whatever thing, but I still believe in terms of game development that you can give interesting mechanical inputs to things that are meant to be cinematic in a way that makes it more enjoyable for me. I don't know if that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it necessarily has to be about like getting the high score, like going on the journey the best. You know, I'm not asking the game to do that, but I did feel like most of the game was just me pushing the left stick forward. And you know, and that's a great oversimplification. Obviously, the visuals and the music was great. The music's great. You know, it very much like reeks of kind of like film soundtrack music or like something like that. So if you are like in the mood to watch a movie that is really like
but
an
you
amazing,
also want to play a game.
yes, like this is what it is for. You know, if you want to
Yeah.
see an amazing animated film that has a great soundtrack and
That's
like amazing
interactive.
set pieces, but also you want to like be able to kind of pause the movie and look around in that world, then this is for you. Like that, it's awesome. And I can't fault it for that at all. I think it is so cool. But like where my brain came at it from, I just found it like a little bit lacking from a gameplay perspective in a way that like didn't quite capture me for the full length of it.
And I think that's like totally fair, right? Like they basically made this game. They were like, okay, so Amani, we can't get her to play normal video games.
Yeah, so how can we get her to love a
what
video
are we
game?
gonna do? Like, she doesn't play
I think
games.
that's totally true.
I feel like that's the conversation that they had.
Absolutely.
Which I'm very grateful for.
Yeah. And so like I can see this is the kind of game that I think you could sit down and play with like a significant other or maybe a parent or something like that. Somebody who's like, oh, you know, video games are just violent and shooty and whatever. Like this is something you could sit down and be like, remember, you know, Pixar movies you loved, or like Kubo and the Two Strings, or like remember that thing that you saw on like, you know, that you thought was emotional. Like this is that for video games. Like this is going to make you feel that way. So one thing that I did find a little weird was a lot of people were really into the multiplayer aspect of it, which is kind of like incidental multiplayer, where as you walk around, you happen to find another journeyer, another wanderer. I think they're actually is what they're technically called. You happen to find them wandering around and you can wander with them. You know, like you can sort of like chirp at them, like you have a button for like rudimentary communication. I wasn't really into that. I didn't like that. I felt like it was intrusive to my experience, which is funny. I don't know. But like when I'm playing a game like this, I really like to take my time and just like totally go at my own pace and just like explore every nook that I want to. You know, like I find it to be something that I like about it. And having somebody else in that space was just like weirdly invasive. I don't know why that is. I didn't feel like, to me, it made it like pressure. Like I was like, oh, like what's that guy gonna do? Like, is he gonna go forward? Is he gonna trigger something? Am I not gonna be able to see the whole game? Like if he goes forward, or do I need to catch up with him? Or like, am I gonna lose him? Or I don't know. To me, the incidentalism of it just, it didn't do what I wanted. I would have liked it a little bit more if it was like more isolated and gave me the time to explore. But I do get it. If you're somebody, like you said, one of your friends is really into like guiding other players through it, and like that's cool. Like if you get into the game and like get your white cape and your full scarf and you know walk around and guide other players and you're kind of like a Zen master of this game, I could see the multiplayer being interesting. But in terms of just like having some person I don't know plop into the game beside me and throw off my pacing of what I was doing, I just felt it a little off-putting.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was true or not for you, but
and I think that's like interesting because I think you're right. Like there are things that are triggered in this game that are like the first time you see it is the most important.
Yeah.
So if somebody's kind of pushing you through and wants you to just do it, like that's definitely not the way this is supposed to be experienced.
Yeah. And I'm not even like saying specifically that happened. I just had the feeling of like, it's just more like put that anxiety in me when I was playing. Like, is that going to happen? Like, is this guy pushing me at a pace that I'm not like, that I don't want to do for myself?
So would you recommend this to people?
Yes. Like I said, like my recommendation is for people who are not gamers to get into it more. And if you are a gamer, you have to be the right type of gamer. Like if you're the kind of person who plays Call of Duty and Madden every year, like don't even fucking bother. I mean, why are you listening to this podcast anyway? like those, it's probably, you definitely
haven't you figured out
to,
we're not for you at this point.
I'm not saying that I don't like Call of Duty. Like I like Call of Duty, but you need to have some open-mindedness in like the structure of a game, of like how much a developer can play with it and still call it a game. You need to be willing to engage in that conversation and have that dialogue with them, or you're just going to find it to be boring. And that's more up to like the person, that's more of a personal decision. But I would recommend it. I would recommend it more, like I said, as a showpiece. Sit down with some friends who aren't into games, like your arty farty friends or friends from art school or whatever, and be like, here, remember Super Mario Brothers? Like, this is where we are now. And I think it can be a pretty amazing experience if you go about it like that.
Yeah.
Kind of
and that's exactly what happened to me. Like,
oh, well, there you go.
A gamer friend got me his art school friend, sat me down in front of a projector.
Yeah.
And we played.
And I mean, and that's totally like, so you like your experience with it is kind of like
the epitome of how you're supposed to experience it.
I would say it could, and would hopefully be experienced by people to like put it in their top 5.
You should go play Forgotten. You should go play Forgotten Realms. No, you should go play. Oh my God, what's it called?
What's Forgotten Realms.
It's Forgotten Realms is the expansion pack to this game. It's the iPad game with the little princess and it's puzzles.
Oh, Monument Valley.
Yes, you should go play Monument Valley, because I think that game solves the things that you were, because it's puzzles. Like it's a puzzle.
Yeah,
it's a set of puzzles, and the puzzles do get hard. So you get the same kind of a deal where it's like this experiential kind of like silent protagonist. You don't really know the whole story. It's beautiful, but then the actual mechanics get to the point where you have to have some skill to get through.
And that was kind of like there's like one section in Journey where you're like in this underwater trench thing, and like you sort of have to avoid these guys, and like it's kind of made like it kind of damages you, but not really.
Are planned. Like you are going to situations succeeding or failing on purpose.
Yeah, so. It's just and so I agree. Like in my heart, I wish Journey was a little more like that. Mm-hmm. A little more about putting barriers in your way that are fun to solve, rather than just letting you
do this thing.
Just go in any direction. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Cool. Moving on. The third thing of your list I want to talk about is On the Wings of a Delirious Demon.
I was expecting that to be more negative than Velvet Underground, so that's interesting.
I really enjoyed this.
Nice.
It is this weird experimental. I listened to about a 14-minute long version.
That is what it is, yeah.
Yeah, 14 minutes of like ambient sound experimentation. Mm-hmm. It felt like it was somebody had put on a darker version of Fantasia.
I was just about to say that.
Yep. Yeah, it felt like a short film. You talked about how it feels like sort of like this orchestration piece that is very strange and weird. Do you know, like maybe in Akira and those kinds of animes, when the hero sees the horrible monster for the first time, they see like the scientific experiment, or they see like the fantastical beast, and it's just like a shot of their face and the characters are like, oh, and then there's a shot of, and then it cuts to the monster, and it's just like 30 seconds of like ambient noise and like bubbles and like weird stuff. And it just felt like 15 minutes of that shot. And I expected at any moment for us to like get a character going, whoa, and then like for a voiceover to be like, no, it can't be, or what is that? Like the whole time.
That's funny. I hadn't thought about that, but you're right. It does.
I loved that. Like all of my notes are like me describing that sequence of shots, and then like it was the soundtrack to a Fantasia equivalent animated film, horror based.
Yeah.
And then the creepiness, about 2 minutes in, the creepiness wore off, and it was just like I was listening to this Foley guy's like portfolio. And like he was super good at it. It was really solid. Like I love that stuff. So for
It's
me, I was
interesting.
like
Yeah,
super into it.
it's all clarinet. It's all clarinet.
Really?
Yep, it's all
That's
clarinet that is
fascinating.
magnetically like this guy Ilhan Mirmalug is the dude, and he's like that's his whole thing is like magnetic tape manipulation to like
Yeah.
take acoustic instruments and make them sound like Foley sounds like
Yeah.
fucking crazy shit.
I would definitely like if I would recommend this to anybody who like really likes movies, who really likes
It
the
is very
sci-fi
cinematic.
genre,
Yeah.
who likes like experimental stuff. I would listen to this again, honestly. It like got my brain working in an interesting
Interesting.
way. I felt like I was like trying to make sense of it, and therefore I did like interesting things with story and character in it, which is how I like to listen to music anyways. So
Yeah.
I I felt like it was a good little shot in the arm of adrenaline to the storytelling part of your brain. If you're interested in Foley, if you're interested in filmmaking, this is all relevant stuff, I think, in
Oh
terms
yeah.
of like how sounds can like emotionally take you where you want to go. It's creepy, it's weird, it's short, it's only 14 minutes. It's interesting. I liked it.
It's funny
I don't
because
really have
I'm
very
not
much to
usually
say about
a sound to picture kind of person, but this like undeniably does do that for me.
it. Yeah,
Like you were
I didn't
saying,
know if you were going to agree with me on that.
no,
I
I do.
so it's cool.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Like
we
when
sound
I
like
see
we're
it,
in
all I think of
unison
is
on this.
and I don't know if it's because it's called, Delirious Demon, so there's a little bit of that, but I just see like the Night on Bald Mountain, the demon from Fantasia, like you were saying. Like that's
Mm,
exactly what is in my head when I think about this stuff.
yeah. It's
Um,
cool. If this all sounds interesting to you, you should definitely go check it out. It's a fun time. And it doesn't take a lot of effort. It just sort of all washes over you, you
mhm.
know? Like because there's no place this guy was coming from but experimentation, you can just sort of like let it settle into you, which I really liked.
Yeah.
I don't really have very much to say about it. It was very interesting. I'm glad I listened to it. I'm glad you pointed it in my direction or
I
pointed me in
think
its
I would
direction.
recommend listening to it um on like either headphones or like a system that has like a good bit of left right stereo panning because there's a lot of three dimensionality to the
Ooh,
song.
I didn't
Like
do that. I should though, because
yeah,
that sounds like it would make
if
the
you listen to it
experience
like
more
that, like if you listen to it in a way that where you can have the space around you, like the sounds come from, and that's one thing I
all
really love
over.
about it is the sounds come from all over, and like you're sort of constantly being like, oh, like whoa, like what's that? And it's coming at you and fading out and like going away, and it's it has like a quite a bit of physicality to like the actual composition of it, which is
Yeah.
something that I don't think you get that often in music.
No, that sounds awesome, especially because it's like this weird like thing. It's almost like alive,
It
right?
is,
It's this
yeah, it is.
weird
It just
thing
it
you
feels
can't
like a
really
thing.
comprehend. So that I feel like would be really good. I should listen to it again.
Yeah,
Guys, go check it out. What are you doing?
check it out.
Yeah.
What are you doing not listening to 1960s Turkish tape manipulation musicians?
Huh. I feel like we took a turn there somewhere.
All right, my next one is Sabriel.
Ooh.
Which
Right smack dab in the middle. I
right smack dab in
expected
the
you
middle.
to this to be the first thing you talked about, honestly. So that's cool.
Oh no, I mean so full disclosure, I did not finish it, not through like dislike or great what's the word that you had with Eraserhead, through great struggle, just through time restraints. Honestly, I was at Baltimore this last weekend, and by the time I started reading it, I just like didn't have enough time to get through it. I am at the part when she is in the, is it Whole Hollow with Mogget, and they are about to
Oh, the sinkhole
unfreeze touch was it Touchstone?
touchstone.
Yeah,
Okay, so you're about
I think
a
like
third to
about
halfway through.
I'm like roughly halfway page count wise.
Okay, cool.
So-
I will say that that's the point at which the story really kind of like pace wise just like goes for it.
well, that's what I was kind of interested that I felt like I got halfway through the book and I was looking at it and I was like, man, not a lot has actually happened, which is like
Mhm.
okay. Like I like it. I liked
Yeah.
it a lot, but I was like, when I was reading it, I was like, what? Like, what is this actually going to get to? Like, how much is he actually going to be able to put in the next 200 pages when in the first 200 pages, like, she hasn't really gone that far from what it was. I was expecting it to be like, and I did end up liking that about it. I enjoyed that it was a little bit more intimate, like just focusing on Sabriel herself and less kind of like big scale world shattering, which maybe it gets to that in the latter half of the book. I don't know. but it is a fantasy book from smack dab in the mid 90s. It's part of a trilogy. From what I have read, I think I will probably at some point continue on this because I did enjoy it. But it's basically about a, like, I mean, she's got to be like 18 or 19 or whatever, like a of age, you know, newly adult woman who's lives in this world that I thought the world was awesome. It kind of, this is going to sound strange, but it reminded me of Full Metal Alchemist, if you've been into that, where it's like some of the world is kind of this like steampunky World War I-esque like time period that we associate with, but then at the same time there's like magic users running around in the world, and it kind of has like that clash of like time periods in it. I don't know if you agree with that at all, but that was just what came to my head.
I don't disagree with it. I'm not super familiar with Full Metal, so
okay. Yeah. And so it's about this girl who lives in this world that, like I said, the top half of it, I guess from what I understand, I don't know the whole world exactly, but the old kingdom is this top half. It's much more like rampant with magic and death, necromancy, all kinds of things like that. And then there's a wall, and then the bottom half is kind of like, I don't know, just like England or whatever, just like a normal ass place in like the 1920s or something.
Yes, so exactly.
It starts,
and there the twain shall meet. Like they're incompatible with each other. They are.
And so it starts with her as like, it starts with like a little prologue where she's like a baby and she gets pulled out of death by her father, who, that was a kind of a cool twist. Who I thought his name was Abhorsen, who was Abhorsen.
But Abhorsen is a title that you inherit. Yeah.
And so then it flashes forward to her being 18-year-old, whatever, at this girls' school. She is like I kind of verged on Mary Sueism a little bit. I don't know. Like she was like, oh, I'm #1 at magic and I'm great at combat arts and I'm super cool or whatever. And like, I don't know. Like I didn't feel like it was well defined as to what she was like not the tits at school. But so she's at this woman's school.
I feel like that, just to jump in on that, I feel like that's negated by the fact that then she goes into this situation that she's still completely unprepared to deal with it. No, which was like, I thought a really good way of being like, listen, you can be good at stuff and then still be screwed. Like,
yeah, that's true. Because it's
kind
like
of an argument.
She's book smart, but she doesn't really know like what's going on.
Yeah, she's not like, she's still like completely unequipped for this thing gonna go do.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So she gets summoned by this event. She gets her father's necromancing equipment, and she realizes that her father is trapped in death somewhere, which I think is really interesting, the way that Nyx has like put this thing out. It's like there's these gates towards death, and it's like multiple gates that you have to pass through to be like truly dead. And depending on your abilities of magic and willpower, you can kind of like venture into them if you're a necromancer, like pull things out or push things further in.
Yeah, like death is a place. It's like this series of rivers and gates.
And then depending on like the strength of some of the free mages and stuff, they can like stick in death and become like powerful evil spirits and things. So so basically Sabriel sets out from the lower, the new kingdom, to go up and cross the wall and find out what's going wrong with Papa Bear. And there the adventure starts. She passes through the wall. She has this pretty awful trek getting to where she's going. And then the part that I enjoyed the most from what I had read was the Abhorsen's house and Mogget and stuff. I really like Mogget a lot.
Mogget is so great.
Yeah. And I guess I read like rough synopsis of the rest of like the stories and the end of this. And so I have gathered that he's in the other books more, because he's a bound servant to the Abhorsen line, who, like, it turns out, her father is not the only Abhorsen. He's like the 52nd and she's the 53rd Abhorsen. And it's passed down through this line. And it's basically like necromancers who have both the charter magic and necromancy magic in their control. And so they they basically try to like put right in the world all of the shenanigans that necromancers do and like lay the dead to rest. I mean, that's how I would explain it. I don't really
sick
know.
Of those shenanigans. Those necromantic shenanigans. I have to say that
at this point, to me, the magic system is probably the most confusing. just because like I don't really understand what the difference between free magic and charter magic is versus necromancy versus the bells. Like from what I understand, free magic is just like existing magic in the world, and then the charter like bound the free magic to be used by people, but then
Mhm.
necromancy is perhaps a separate thing. And so it seems like free magic is now like the charter stones are cracking and the magic is getting wilder out in the old kingdom. Is that like on the right track? I'm a
Yeah,
little bit shady on that.
you definitely like it's some the thing one of the things I like most about Sabriel is that he doesn't just hand it to you in
No, I
terms
mean
of
like when he's talking about the bells, he's just like, this is Galargablarg and this is Samarmamath and this is, I was like, whoa, bro, like let's wait up on these bell names, my
No, he's
man.
just
Like
like
I'm
take
not
it.
gonna,
Take
yeah.
it.
And then
You're
later
on
she's
your
like,
own,
yeah,
dude.
she pulled out Saragath and threw it around his neck, and I was like, what? And I had to like,
Saraneth, don't be
whatever. I had to
silly.
like pull back through it, like the pages and be like, what the fuck even is that bell? Like, what does it do?
So, if you want a little
Primer.
spark notes of magic system, charter magic's on one side and free magic, and then necromancy is on the other. They're
Okay.
like the separate
Okay.
things, and the only place they meet is with Sabriel and the Abhorsen.
Yes, that is
Those are
what as I
the
understood it to be.
Abhorsen is the merger of those two. Otherwise, they're separate.
Yes.
There are free magic is like the basis of the system of charter magic, and charter magic is basically symbols that funnel free magic energy, which is just like this sort of like big frenetic thing that's neither good nor bad, that's just sort of like destructive and there,
Mm-hmm.
into sort of useful and helpful magical tools. Charter stones are how people are connected to free magic through the charter. So when they're broken, the charter is broken, and that's bad. And then on the other side of it, there's necromancers who use bells to walk through death and make the dead do what they want, come back to life and do crazy evil stuff.
So even evil necromancers use bells.
Yes, the
Okay.
necromancer bells are like the tools of the necromancer.
Well, it's also she like whistles at some point, so it's just like
yeah,
music.
it's the idea of sound. Like
Yeah, which I thought was cool.
sound is the
Not
magic
something that I've
system in
seen.
necromancy. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then bells are like the physical tools, physical manifestations of that.
Yeah, and so a lot of it is like you said. It's a lot of it is her stepping into this world that we don't really know and that she doesn't really know. So it's a good like she's a good character to follow into this crazy magic world because she is as clueless about most of the old kingdom as we are. So far I've really enjoyed it. I don't know, I know where it goes in a plot bullet point sense, but I don't know what necessarily it is like in terms of reading a novel about it. But I have enjoyed it. I can't say since I haven't finished it, like I can't say I have any like super deep meanings about it. I think it has one of the more interesting magic systems of any book that I've read, and I really like. It is unusual to see that clashing of new world and old world stuff, and I really like that. So like right now I'm at the point where the world and the ideas I think are awesome. And I just need to see more of like how the characters inhabit them. I'm a little bit worried, like it sort of does fall a little bit into the trap. At least I could see it follow into just sort of the young adult thing where it's like she's the heroine and she unsticks this guy, and like from the second, like he hasn't even been unfrozen yet, and as soon as she turned the corner and it was like he was a young man in the prime of his physique, I was like, well, they're gonna get married. Like I knew that from the second I saw him, and I looked up ahead and I was like, oh, okay, that does happen eventually, and like so I worry about just the way it's written, like following a little tropey, but I feel like there's a lot of interesting world building around it that I have really enjoyed so far.
Yeah, I don't know if I can defend it on that sense. So go ahead and finish it. We'll see what it says. I'm glad you're liking it though. I knew you would like the magic system.
Yeah,
and
it's
I feel
really
like
cool.
Sabriel as a character is really strong. Like her monologue feels really honest, and she's not. I don't think she's a Mary Sue because I feel like there's enough like self-doubt there, and like she makes mistakes and her skill level isn't that high, and she's constantly like, oh shit, like I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready for any of this. This doesn't make any sense.
Wait, so what did you think I was gonna dislike about it? Because so far those are like the only.
It is YA. Like it is very, very, very much a YA novel. things are going to be easier for her. They're not going to go to that darker psychological
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
Just because she's, like that's the book. Like that's what that's the nature of the world she's living in. What I think Sabriel does well is like bring up the stakes enough, like kind of like Harry Potter manages to do
It
for
does
like the
feel
middle
like that.
grade
Yeah.
and like for the later ones that get into the YA level. The stakes are raised enough, that you feel like there's a real struggle there. But to me, the absolute best part of Sabriel is the magic system.
Yeah,
and the way
the world and the magic I think is very interesting. I'm just
Yeah.
like I said, I just don't know if it's going to be undone with a little
I
bit
mean,
of YA stuff to me.
yeah, I think you should read it. I
Yeah.
definitely don't think my favorite part of the book is the climax and the ending.
It seemed
I
a little
enjoyed
bit generic when I like sort
Yeah.
of read as to what was going on.
I enjoyed it. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just one of those things where I was reading it when I was like, 14, and I was like,
It was
holy,
a perfect time
yeah,
for you.
this like transitioned me into like thinking seriously about magic systems, I will say.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and it's definitely a novel in that sense. Like I
Yeah.
have anything quite like it. So also, this was the first
I'm
of the
glad you're
third,
enjoying it. That's good.
but there's a fifth book is coming out like next month.
Oh, really? I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah, there's a
How do
fifth
you know
Old
more
Kingdom book coming out like next month
Cool.
in October.
I should read the fourth one
Yeah.
at some point.
I enjoyed it. I would recommend it. I think I would recommend it if you're into like the Harry Potter thing. I think is a very apt place to. It's like if you wanted to start Harry Potter like at book 4, maybe like that's what it feels like. Like if you
In
sort
terms
of
of like
skipped,
maturity level.
yeah, in terms of maturity, it's like starting at that place, which is awesome. And even if like if you've been into more like Maze Runner, young adult stuff like that, and like what's the Divergent shit and stuff like that, like those are not for me. But I feel like if you liked the idea of those and you kind of want to like step up
See
the
it
game
done
of
well.
yeah, like if you want to step up the world building and like would rather see that done in like a Lord of the Rings type thing, not to say that this is a direct analog to that, but if you like the idea of like young female protagonist, Hunger Games or whatever, and you want to take it into a place that I think is more interesting, like holistically, this could be a good step for you.
Yeah. I like am personally like offended that you would compare it to Divergent or Maze Runner because to me
Well,
those like suffer from fundamental storytelling flaws. Those characters are so thin.
I know. I'm not saying I like them and I haven't read those. I'm saying like if you like the idea of following that age range of protagonists, and you want to see it done in a world that is not shit, like that's where
for me those books begin and end at the premise, and then the characters are just kind of like
ancillary.
And like Sabriel does the follow through work.
Exactly. So like if you like the idea of that type of character and that age range and that kind of like struggle, but not like really horrendous like Game of Thrones, bits and bobs getting cut off and shit. Like if you like the struggle, but with the age range of slightly more accessible, like this might be something for you.
And if you're at all into fantasy or interested in magic systems,
yeah, absolutely,
definitely check this out. This does really interesting stuff.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, not to like take over your Sabriel pitch, but I just kind of had to get in there. Did you know the final project is on Sabriel? I'm doing development where I'll send you a picture of Mogget that I drew the other day. It's really good.
Mogget's I really like this. Cool. So Mogget's like a a bound magic entity that is bound in the form of a cat, and he kind of has like a mix of like cat tendencies, but then also it's at one point recently from where I was, when he's unleashed from his collar, he's like a big bad magic. Yeah. And so that's a cool struggle because it's like when he's released, he wants to like kill the Abhorsons for binding him, but at the same time, while he's bound, he still gives Sabriel the ring to bind him if something goes wrong again. So like it's hard to know at this point for me in the book like what his actual motivation is. Like he certainly on some level resents them for binding him, but I think it's like become a relationship that
ultimately he prefers.
Yeah, that ultimately like is something that's not just
like
a servitude thing for him.
Like think of like a house cat who's like infinitely powerful but also likes the fact that you kind of like feed him.
Yeah.
So
it's like infinitely powerful, but if you kick him out into the world, like
but he's like lazy. So
no, it is like that.
He would rather be like a cat than like a free magic entity at that point.
And I like that about Mogget. I think he's a cool, like he kind of, because Sabriel is a little, for me personally, is a little earnest and kind of like But like
Very
he brings the snark and the sarcasm and the bitterness, like, to not to the extent that he's like actively mean to her, but it has a nice contrast to what
he's
Sabriel
been
brings.
living in the world for a long time at this point.
Yes,
He's
he's
jaded.
a jaded individual.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Next thing on your list was Chinatown.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, Roman Polanski directed. I forget who wrote the screenplay. Whoever they are, they're a boss. They're absolute
I actually
beast.
don't know.
I looked it up and then I forgot it. So really quick, what I liked about this is that it felt dated in the best way possible.
Yeah, it was classic.
Yeah, the aesthetics were incredible. Beautiful, beautiful movie. They weren't casting the most beautiful people they could find. They were casting the best actors they could find. Oh my God.
Very much.
What a concept for making movies. Everybody felt like really real and rounded. The screenplay was absolutely just incredible. It had that quality that I know you really like, where it's like they're just talking and everything feels very like sort of throwaway and insular. Like it's just people saying what they're going to say, but you glean so much from from what they say and how they interact with each other. Like who they are as people comes through, right? Oh man, what's the main guy's name?
Jake?
No, the actor who played Nichols.
Yeah, Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson stand out.
Yeah,
he's gold star performance. Also, his girlfriend
Faye Dunaway.
Faye Dunaway is they are like the shining stars of this film, in my opinion. They are so good. They're so good together. They really understood what the screenplay was trying to do, and you could tell they really dug into that dialogue and dug into the plot, and so pleasing, so satisfying to see. Another thing that I really liked, it was R. It was very R. It's an adult film, but unlike R-rated movies now where it's like, oh, we're doing an R-rated, we better have the most blood or the most nudity or the most sex or the most profanity, right? It was like this idea that like being R-rated, like people are naked in their lives. Like at some point, like people are going to not have clothes kind of on.
Like, it's not a big deal.
Or at some point, they're going to see something that is really violent. Or at some point, they're going to see this or do that. Like being R-rated is an actual experience that we all have in our lives. Like we're going to see a naked person at some point. We're going to see gratuitous sex at some point or be a part of sex at some point. We're going to see at least a private detective is going to see some violence at some point, but it's not consistent. It's not like his life is sex.
Yeah, that's what I do like about
violence.
that. Like the bursts of them make them more impactful.
It made it feel relatable, real, honest. Like that's how you would experience those type of things if you were in this profession of being like a private investigator, right? Like if you're hired to go, take pictures of somebody having sex with somebody else, that's what they're going to look like. And like, it may be shocking or it may be R-rated, but it's also like, no, this is the reality of the situation. Like if I just had sex with a woman, I'm going to pull on my pants and you might see my ass for a second, like it didn't feel like, oh, look how sexy this is. Oh, look how violent this is. Oh, look how like into our own R-ratedness is. It's like, no, like to tell this story honestly, there's going to be R-rated moments and that's just the way it goes. That's what this life is. I thought that was so refreshing and so like, it just felt so good, to be like, no studio came in and was like, oh, you're doing R-rated, you might as well just go for it.
Yeah.
I will say some negatives for me was I feel like the mystery suffers from its own cleverness. In the same way, the first half where it's like, sometimes in Sorkin, you're like, how do they know any of this stuff? Like, how does he know the whole history of like World War II battalions?
Yeah.
There were points, especially the first third, where I was like, how does Jack Nicholson know everything?
I agree. I can agree with that.
Whatever. But then the mystery was set up so well by the last third. I was just like, fine, like let's move. Like everything's falling into place. It feels satisfying. I've done the work to get here. Like let's get through this. You know,
it's like my favorite ending. Like the last, I love the ending so.
The ending is so shocking. It's so nihilistic. It's so sad. It is absolutely horrifying. I feel like I would need to watch the whole movie again to make sense of it.
I know.
This movie was a lot of work. It was very it
requires you to pay attention.
Yes, and it's paced. It's long. It's 2 hours. It's 2 hours of you thinking, of you keeping up. Like this movie doesn't give you anything.
Yeah,
I would argue. Which is exhausting. but satisfying by the time we get to the end.
I think that's very
It's
fair.
really good. It's really well made. I wouldn't say this is my favorite genre of film. I wouldn't say this is something that I would naturally sort of gravitate towards, but I'm really glad I watched it. And just the two leads alone, like their performance, it's worth it to get into it
I really like
for that.
what's his name? The he is a director, John Ford.
Yeah, I was
Or
gonna
John
say
Huston.
if he was
John
in
Huston.
more scenes, I would say that it was his movie because
Like,
he
oh
was
my god,
absolutely
he's so
incredible.
good because like the way he addresses, like he always says Jack Nicholson's name wrong and stuff. Like he's so dismissive and like creepy, but it just comes off in like these weird little things that he does.
That
Oh man.
end when he grabs that
Oh,
girl, I'm just like, don't stop.
Yeah.
Somebody shoot him. Oh my God.
Yeah.
It was utterly horrifying. It was
Yeah.
all utterly horrifying.
You know,
I will say this movie isn't particularly great to women. They're
yeah, that's
sort of flung around, they're sort of protected, they're sort of kept, and Faye Dunaway does a great job of living in a man's world. There were things about it socially that I was like, oh, this guy's hitting his wife, this guy's doing this. And it was acceptable because it was like they weren't arguing that this is the way life is supposed to be.
Yeah.
They were saying this is the way life is.
And
this
so
is
I
a
think
period drama. This is how women are treated.
Yeah.
You have to accept that about this situation. And it's really terrifying and sad.
This kind of reminds me of a certain extent to the Velvet Underground Beatles comparison that we were drawing earlier, where like if you look at films from like the 40s and the 50s in Hollywood, and it's, you know, kind of like whether it's Maltese Falcon or like whatever it is, like things that are similar in this genre, like the relationships are a lot more kind of glitzed up and nice. And then this is kind of like the dark underbelly of like what that would have actually really been like. You know, like it's not like you're a private investigator and you're just like, wait for me back at my apartment, doll. And it's like, it's like maybe you beat that woman, or maybe you like because it and like you said, they're not saying it's right or wrong. They're just saying like that's how it would have happened. And it kind of reminds me of the
people
same thing,
relate
like,
to each other.
Yeah. Like the way the Velvet Underground is like pulls back, you know, hippie drug stuff of the 60s and says like there was a nasty underbelly to this. It's kind of the same way. It's like this pulls back the kind of like film noir, like, you know, glitzy private eye stuff and is like, no, like there's some gnarly stuff going on here. And like, it's not always going to end happy.
Totally agree with that. If you like movies, you should watch this movie. It may not be your favorite, but you need to see it.
I would agree. I think it is required, completely required viewing.
I wouldn't say it's in my top 10 favorite things I've ever seen of all time, but it's definitely in my top 10 most like influential.
Yeah, perhaps like important or whatever it is like that.
Really good.
Roman Polanski actually is he's in it. He's the guy who cuts his nose with a knife.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's Roman Polanski.
Weird, creepy. All right. Definitely recommend. Moving on, Will.
Moving on. My next one is, you know, I have a kind of a toss up between this because it's weird for me to talk about Princess Mononoke because it
perfect.
Was so already part of my life and like an understanding of animation, you know, previous to this.
Yeah.
Like it's the only one I think from out of both of us that we probably share experience. I mean, obviously like your experience of what you're talking about, like renting it on a VHS and like Israel or whatever it was, is significantly different than mine. But I think we both share our like understanding and love of it as an important thing. So like, it's not that I don't have a lot to say. It's just that I totally agree with everything that has been said about it.
Yeah.
You know, like it is great. You know, I mean, it's a great movie. It's for me, it's kind of like the perfect mix of old school Miyazaki and like becoming a little bit of the newer school stuff. You know, it's at that real sweet spot of Japanese animation in the 90s when digital stuff like was creeping its way in, but it still looks entirely hand drawn.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't look like it's been, you know, mucked around with computers. I like it a lot because it feels like it harkens back to, you know, it has like a little bit more violence and edginess to it, which is something that, you know, sometimes Miyazaki movies stray very far away from, like
Mhm.
Ponyo or whatever are about as far in the opposite direction of that as you could get. And I kind of do like that it takes a little bit more of like a Nausicaa approach to portraying violence as like incidental, but still kind of like factual and a little gnarly when it happens.
Yeah.
Um,
Like the violence reminds me of like Chinatown, where it just is
it
like if
does,
people
yeah,
fight, people lose
yeah.
their hands or their heads
Yeah,
or whatever.
like when he's when he shoots the arrow, especially that's a scene that I will always remember for my whole life. Like, because I remember watching this movie and just thinking like anime was one thing, and then he shoots the samurai sword and it pulls his arms off, and I was like, oh shit, like this is crazy, this is nuts.
Yeah.
And there's a couple moments like that in this movie, especially like towards the end with some of the violence with like the creatures fighting the boars and everything. Like I know this movie so well, and I like am so.
I must have seen this
I've seen this
at
movie like
least
10
20
times.
times.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it, which for me, I'm not like the biggest rewatcher of movies. Like Chinatown is one of the movies that I've seen the most, and I've probably seen that like 4 or 5 times, and that's like high for me. And Eraserhead the same way, probably seen that 5 or 6 times.
How?
But apart from that, like I love it. It's just love it.
Oh my
But
god.
yeah. I mean, the one thing I will say is that the pacing is deliberate, and that's not necessarily good or bad. It's just a Miyazaki thing. Like he just paces his films in a way that sprawl out rather than like present a plot.
I feel like
sometimes.
watching a Miyazaki movie is like lying on the most comfortable bed
Yeah,
you've
and just
ever laid on
having
and not being
watch.
sleepy. Just like enjoying the experience of like
Yeah.
being something like physically tactile. Like watching a Miyazaki movie is almost tactile for me in terms of my relationship with how the film like unfolds. Like I just feel comfortable. I feel
Mhm.
like taken care of and supported and safe
Yeah,
by
and
the
so
way
like
he builds
that
things
style of
out.
stuff is, you might think based on what we've been talking about is not something that I am like in love with, because I'm not necessarily like a comfort consumer for that stuff. But I don't know, for whatever reason, like I have, always been drawn to Miyazaki stuff, and he has a lot of themes that I like and enjoy. I will say one thing about Miyazaki's movies is I hope one day, I pray and hope that we get new releases of all of his movies with different English dubs.
Really?
Myself personally, for anime, and I know this might be like scandalous, I don't know. If I'm watching foreign films like live action, I am a subtitle guy all the way. I think dubs are goofy on live action, like when it doesn't match up and stuff. I don't like it. But just for me personally, for anime, I like dubs. I like English dubs. I would prefer to listen to it rather than have the Japanese voice acting. However, Miyazaki's films have almost exclusively been done with celebrity voices instead of professional voice actors. And I think it suffers wildly from inconsistency through all of his movies. Like in this film, like Billy Bob Thornton is like fucking terrible. And Billy Crudup plays Ashitaka, like the main guy, and he's kind of weird and monotone. I don't know. And like it sucks because I like, there are voice actors who are professional voice actors who do a lot of anime and video game voice work, and I like a lot of them. And I would love, like deep down in my heart, I would love one day to have a complete Miyazaki set of films redubbed with professional voice actors, because almost universally they use celebrities and actors, and not even actors sometimes. Like the Ponyo films use like Miley Cyrus's and the Jonas Brothers like little siblings for something like, and it just doesn't sit well with me. I don't know. Like that's always something that I've struggled with Miyazaki's movies, is just the dub sometimes comes off as being like really at odds with what the movie is to me. I don't know.
Did you know that
Tina
Neil
Fey
Gaiman wrote the adaptation script?
I did.
He like took a translation and like
I did
tweaked
know
it.
that. Yeah.
Interesting fact. I disagree with you about the voice acting. I think it's fine. You will never get a professional voice cast dub of Princess Mononoke.
I
Not in your
want it, though.
lifetime.
I
I
want
know
it,
you
though.
do. I'm just saying Disney spent a whole shit ton of money on these.
Oh
So
yeah,
they're
yeah. I mean,
done.
it's not. They're not. I'm not saying that they're in like a rush to do that. I just like when I think of anime television shows like and stuff. There's so many English voice actors that I really like a lot, and I would love to
Yes.
see them take on these, Miyazaki films in a way that's more interesting than.
I respect your
some of the
wishes.
characters.
I get where you're coming from. I just want you to be like
Realistic. with it.
realistic.
I'm gonna let
don't
you
want-
down on light.
Yeah.
All right. So we are 2 hours into this bad boy.
Yo, we're almost done. Last two.
Do it.
Okay. Planetary. Warren Ellis.
Did you finish it?
I finished it. Loved every single page. Loved every single
Nice.
panel.
I'm glad.
It is my new favorite comic book.
Isn't it good, dude? It's
It
so
is
fucking
so mind-blowingly good. I'm not even gonna. Okay, I'm gonna try and pitch it. You ready? There
Yeah.
are people. They're part of Planetary. Cool shit happens. Go read it.
Go read
Really,
it.
really good. It is sort of like this. The guy is playing with the idea of like, well, superheroes are interesting and great, but like,
They
realistically
stole
speaking,
a lot from creativity.
yeah, realistically speaking, what if basically they're like, what if the superheroes never made it, and instead the Fantastic Four were evil, and our new superheroes are all archaeologists?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the bare bones premise of this thing.
Yeah.
Fascinating and so interesting. There are a lot of allusions to classic comic book culture.
There's
There's
tons
a really
of pulp and cop and pop culture stuff.
yes,
Yeah.
there's some really great kaiju stuff. There's some really great sci-fi stuff. There's some really great sort
There's
of
like a Doc
a
Savage character.
yes, there's all kinds of really cool stuff. There's a really great, I think it's called Lost Magic or something like that. It's one of the issues where basically it's like, here's the Justice League, except not
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
Here's my version of the Justice League.
Yep.
Great. So interesting, so cool. There's a Superman illusion in it that's really fun. I don't know really how to really pitch it. There are these things called Sentry Babies there, which the idea of Sentry Babies are explored. They're like these sort of ageless, powerful humans type things. And then basically there's this thing called the Breach, which has all of this weird like science and magic sort of swirling around it. And it's basically our characters exploring the Breach in competition with some other characters who are also exploring the Breach, and everybody's sort of like harvesting knowledge and magic and technology. And there's sort of like this underground war happening.
Warren Ellis deals with big, weird,
and every issue is kind of different. It's kind of its own thing, and it all just kind of
Cowboy Bebop. That's how I feel like about
it. Yes. It all just sort of like falls into place. The narrative makes sense once you get through like 10 issues. Everything starts like putting itself in the right order. I got through issue 6 and I put it down. I was into it, but I wasn't like fascinated by it.
Yeah, I can see that.
Next issue was the one that made it so I couldn't stop reading it. I will not argue that this is something that is full of like that where the plot kind of like drives the story. I feel like the characters were kind of swimming in this plot that already exists, and it's all kind of just put in front of us.
Yeah,
and it feels I feel like it happened very easily, and it happened without a lot of effort. There's struggles in this. People are doing things that are hard, but it doesn't require you to understand how they're winning in order for them to win or lose.
Yeah.
Which I was okay with because everything was so fascinating, so well written. John Cassaday is not my favorite artist. He was the only artist to do this. He really nails it. Every issue is gorgeous.
It's crazy the amount of stuff that he had to draw for this. Like
so many different kinds of ideas put into this.
Yeah.
The paneling
and like it's not like you can
incredible.
draw shit from reference. Like it's like, oh, draw like a dimension shifting like slip shift spaceship. It's like okay.
here's a entire room full of alien and magical weapons.
Yeah.
Go one panel, 600 weapons. Have fun, you know?
It's nuts.
It's crazy. I don't know if I'm pitching this correctly because I'm all over the place. Just know that the reading...
But so is the series.
Reading this was one of the most satisfying experiences I've ever had in my life.
Wow, really
it was one of those formative comic experiences. I'm so grateful to you, Will. I'm so glad I read it. I'm so glad I read it when I did. I don't know if I would have picked it up. It kind of made me, it was like, how much more good shit is out there?
I know.
Was kind of like my thing. It was like, I didn't even realize how good this was. I
Yeah.
really want to pick up The Authority.
Yeah, I have those, but I have not read them yet.
I'm
Did you read the crossovers in the
I
omnibus?
didn't because I haven't read The Authority. There's a in the omnibus. There's 3 crossovers. They're very long crossovers.
Yeah, they're
It
like
was like the
graphic novels,
last,
basically.
yeah, it was the last fifth of the omnibus was crossovers. So the series ending kind of like snuck up on me because I thought I had all this
A
material to
little more time.
read.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and then it just kind of happened, and I was like, oh,
What
okay.
did you think about the ending? Because it's a little bit controversial, like
I
in
mean,
the
it's
way
very
that
easy
people.
for him to win. I don't care though.
Yeah,
I loved it.
I loved it.
Yeah, and it had that thing that I like where it was like this group of people sort of fixing the world.
Yeah,
But it was also kind of what you're interested in, which is all of these like questions about like us as individuals.
yeah.
Like, do we even matter? Like the psychology of being a hero is very
Because
troubling.
that's
Like,
like my like the thesis of Planetary is kind of like that. The world was weird and interesting at some
yeah,
point when everybody was doing
it's a
their own
strange they
stuff.
keep saying it's a strange
Strange
world.
world.
Let's keep
Was
it that
Yeah,
way.
it's like it used to be like that when it was all pulp comics and strangeness and weirdity, and you could tell whatever stories. And then he's kind of like, I mean, I don't think he's saying like the Fantastic Four are like awful, but well, maybe, I don't know. But he's basically like, with this series, it's kind of his exploration of like, what if the Marvel Age, was that good? Like, was it good that now that everything that we get is the same? Like
Yeah.
that sort of like a few companies or a few characters are like hoarding all of these ideas together. Like, wouldn't it be more interesting if we had these ideas like everywhere and just anybody could do this stuff?
Yeah. It is absolutely above my head. Like I knew I was reading something that was too good for me, you know? And I was like
That's
so
funny.
grateful the whole
I need
time.
to go back and read it because I was just reading like synopses of this to be able to talk about it because I haven't read it in like probably a year and a half, and I was just like, oh shit, I forgot about all this stuff, like how
Yeah.
nutso this whole thing is.
I'm definitely going to read it again, probably in like a month or so. I'm going to let it sit for a little bit and then I'm going to go back in. It was like diving into a pool of clear water, kind of. And then like at the bottom, you're kind of just like going through all this stuff, It was like so satisfying and gorgeous. And like the way it was written was absolutely incredible. The way it was drawn was absolutely incredible. The coloring was absolutely incredible. It was so good, guys. It was so good.
It's
I
also
wish
weird
I
because
could.
that series took like a long time. I
You
think it
could.
was like 9 years for 27 issues or something like that.
I don't know how Cassidy, Casey, I don't know how you say it, and Warren
Yeah, I
Ellis like
say
shared
Cassidy.
the same brain, but they
I
did
know,
for
dude. I
this.
know. Like, it's absurd what he was able to pull out of the
Those
ether.
scripts, yeah.
It's just crazy.
It was absolutely insane.
Yeah.
At the end of I don't know if you have the ending. It's like a little afterword written by Joss Whedon.
I don't know if I do.
It was very interesting. He kind of has some really interesting things to say about the series, about how weird it was, how disjointed it was, how perfect it was. Definitely worth a read if you pick up the omnibus. Planetary's really good. Everybody should read it.
I would actually say it benefits from being a pop culture comic geek in a way that it might not be.
I was just going to say, you need to have like a basic understanding of nerd culture to get into this.
You need to have like a basic understanding of like pop culture from 1900 onward, honestly. Like,
yeah.
I don't think that's true, like in the sense of you should be scared of it. But if you like were just picking up comics and Planetary was the first series you read, like, holy
maybe
fuck,
not for
like,
you. Yeah.
Maybe not, man. Like it's more of, it's not that you couldn't enjoy it. Like, there's still a lot of things that would be enjoyable about it, but like to really scratch underneath the surface and like see what he's doing or trying to do with these different characters and ideas definitely benefits from a primer of comics and film and pop culture ideas.
I will say, as always, I look at things through a lens of like, where are the women?
There's really only one female character in the whole thing,
and then Anna Hark, she was cool.
Who was her mother, right?
Yeah. And then there's one villain who's a girl who was treated very badly by her husband, by the way. It felt a lot like it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen in regards to like Where Are the Ladies, but it also wasn't the best.
No, I don't think
I'm
it
not
did a very good job. I
super
agree
I'm
with
not
that.
super mad at it though, because it was so good. Like it's one of those things where I'm like not gonna like begrudge it completely. Because
It
other
also
than that, it really does well for other cultures. It does well for other religions, other races. It
yeah.
explores this idea of like the world as a whole. I did wish some of the Century Babies were ladies, though.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I agree with that. I think part of the problem is that it kind of lives in that pulp thing where it
And
was
it's
like,
weird because I felt like it had very interesting things to say about like that pulp character of like the Tarzan
yeah, yeah,
kind of a
yeah.
character.
Like
And
he
it
was
had
not a
very
good person.
negative, yeah, it
Yeah.
had very negative things to say about that kind of a character. But then in his own way, Snow was kind of that guy as well.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't
and
know.
all
Yeah,
of the
that is
people he were talking
tricky.
to were that way as well. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was a product of its time, which is not an excuse for being sexist, by the way. I don't
No,
agree with that argument, but
no.
I understand where it comes from at least a little bit.
Yeah. No, I don't think that I don't think it's like I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm just saying like if you are talking about if the intent was to get back to the pulp kind of stuff of creativity, like just the reality of it was that time period did not feature that many female leagues either.
Yeah.
And so like I think Ellis probably missed an opportunity to correct that. Like I
Yeah.
think it would have been nice to see him put that in a different, light.
I will say a lot of the ancillary characters, like the people they meet in the one shots, a lot of them are women, which is cool.
Mhm.
Like there tends to be this idea where it's like, oh, we put 6 women in the main cast and then everybody else in the world is men,
Yeah,
He
yeah.
didn't fall into that trap, which was awesome. But I felt like a lot of the supers, at least in this context, were all like dudes.
No, they were. Yeah, it's all like a
So
council of
and then the
dudes.
one like super powered, like super strong lady, she was great, but she was also like super sexy and sexualized. And it was like,
Chiquita. I do like
yeah.
Chiquita, yeah.
Oh, she's great. I love
She's cool.
her. And I'm fine with women being sexual, but let's get some contrast in here,
No,
Like
I agree. I
let's get some variety. Let's get some people doing things because they're people. Um Bad explanation. I loved Planetary. Please go read it. It absolutely blew me out of the water. I will always be grateful to you
Oh
for
well, I'm
this
glad.
experience. Cool. All right,
Cool.
good stuff.
So
Will,
my
last thing.
my top one was also, discounting Princess Mononoke because that's a tough thing to talk about in terms of liking or not liking something I already, love. But East of West was the last one that I had to talk about, which is a comic book from Jonathan Hickman and Nick Dragotta, who Nick Dragotta is like now firmly embedded in my favorite artist category.
So
Like,
good.
holy shit. It is like a apocalypse. I'm not gonna say post-apocalypse because it's like apocalypse adjacent, I guess. Apocalypse adjacent Western sci-fi book about the horsemen of the apocalypse being brought into the world and their relationship with prophecy and other important people in the world to bring about the end days. I think that's a fair
Yeah.
summarization.
I'm impressed with that. Very good.
And then it largely follows Death as the protagonist, who something happened. So full disclosure, there are 27 issues of this book in existence. I have read through issue 15. I believe that is also where you are, Amani.
I think you've read the first 3 trades basically, and I've
Yes, I
read
read the
trade number
hardcover.
4. So
Okay.
I've read the next 6
Okay.
issues, I think.
So I have
Or no, the
I
next
had
4 or
the
5.
hardcover, which is just called like Apocalypse Year One, because
Yeah.
like it's the story is
And there are
almost
going to
kind of
be
like
3 of those.
yes,
So
the
it's
story
going to
is
be
kind
around
of
my
like
trades.
set in that, and I like that about it. I like that it is self-contained to some extent. When I started this book, I was like really in love with it. I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. Everything is just so good. It follows basically, I still don't know where I am in the story, but something happened 3 or 4 years ago in the story where no, I guess it would have been longer than that, maybe like 9 or 10, because I don't know how young Death's son is, but something happened, let's say a decade ago, where Death was betrayed by the other horsemen. His family was shattered, and then through some happenstance, which I also don't know, the other horsemen were killed or died, and now the other horsemen, which is famine, war, and conquest.
Pestilence?
I think it's
No.
Famine, War, and Conquest. I think.
It's been a while since I read them, so I'm not sure.
They now are brought into the world as like 10-year-old children who are some nasty little kids, and they are brought back into the earth. The whole thing revolves around this the Message, which is like this 3-part modern apocrypha Bible thing, which is very cool. I love the world and the alternate history in this. I think that's one of the coolest parts of it. Like the world is split up into all these different crazy.
Specifically the United States.
Yeah,
It's like
it
an
doesn't
alt
actually say
history.
anything about what's going on outside the United States. So I don't even know
Yeah, it's
what
as if it's
exists,
just the United States.
which is possible. I don't know. So yeah, it's split up into all these different areas, which are super cool. Like it sort of is like this weird alternate civil war where the Civil War didn't end in the same way and just kind of dragged on forever. So the Indian, like Native American nations have space. There's Chinese like contingency which came over from Shanghai, which has an area. Texas is like a separate instance or like a separate independent state. Like New Orleans and Louisiana area is taken over by former slaves. Then there's like a South, like a Confederacy South, and there's like the North, like the Union North, and then there's sort of a neutral middle ground in the middle, and it's really fascinating. I mean, the world building is awesome. I really liked it a lot. It is super well thought out. All of the things that happen are super well thought out. The thing that I started to dislike about it, like because I read the first, like I said, 5 or 6 issues, and I was like super hyped on this. I thought it was the best new series I had read in a long time. The thing that I sort of started to get a little futzy with me is I think it kind of starts to botch a little bit of the execution as it goes on. And I don't know if that's because I read it in, one pretty concentrated sitting, but the way the characters talk and interact with each other, it kind of had, the Sorkin thing, like I was talking about, it's just a lot of it is a lot of like state leaders sitting in a room quoting prophecies at each other. And it sort of gave me that same feeling of like, nobody talks like this. Like, I don't, they just talk this crazy, weird prophecy stuff and like speak in riddles. And I personally don't care for that in my dialogue. Like, I feel like Hickman built this amazing world and these amazing things, but the execution of the dialogue and the characters is not, it's just not what I am all about. Like, there's a whole lot of like, I must stick to the path and like the predetermined destination stuff and prophecy and religious fervor for it, and that's not my thing. So while I appreciate a lot of what he did, like, I don't think it comes together for me quite exactly as I wanted it to. However, the art is fucking fantastic. The art is really nice. Immediately when I started reading this, like 5 issues in, like I said, I went out and started searching for Nick Dragotta, like original art, and I was like, does this exist? And I was surprised to learn that the series is done digitally, which I had no idea. Yeah.
Cool.
He does the series digitally. And so I did a little bit more digging. It's really funny. He does the series digitally, and then his like art rep has him print out like some kind of specific covers and scenes, and then he inks those with like real inks, and then those kind of get sold as original art sometimes. But it's not like there's issue 1 pages 1 through 32 available somewhere that in some collector's collection. It just doesn't exist. Like, unless Nick Dragotta prints it out and makes it, it's not going to be there, which was a little disappointing, but I think it looks amazing for digital art. This series reminded me in quite a few ways of Saga, like quite a few ways, with just the way it looks and the kind of world building and stuff. And it's kind of made me think of like, oh, if Saga wasn't there, if Saga wasn't the biggest thing, already from Image,
this would be
then
it.
this would definitely be. Yeah, that's what I felt when I was reading it. I was like, it's not like it's defeated by Saga or anything, but I feel like it kind of probably suffers in people's minds as something that came out after Saga, and maybe it was not as stunningly groundbreaking because it didn't do that necessarily some of those things like a little bit before Saga, but I still really enjoyed what I've read of it so far.
I'm in love with it. I'm kind of waiting for it to finish, and then I'm going to binge through the whole thing. To
Yeah.
be fair, though, I think Planetary sort of suffers from the same type of a thing where everything is explained through flashback explanations.
Yeah.
Um, I
Yeah,
will
and
say
I
that
need
I
to
think
reread
Planetary does
Planetary
I think
because
that
I
Planetary does a better job of the dialogue as character pieces
yeah.
than maybe my remembrance of East of West does. But for me, East of West, like the world building in it alone, like,
No, I know. Like the
and
world
the images is like,
this is
oh, I can't
yeah,
even handle it. It's so
absolutely.
good.
No, the world building is like I can only think of like a handful of things in the comic book medium that I would consider to even touch the ideas at play here and the like the thought and the world building that went into making this East of West universe, because it is incredible. And the deluxe edition, the hardcover, comes with like a one shot that they put out that was called The
Oh,
World,
cool.
which is like basically synopses of all the different nations and then
I'm
a
gonna have to buy
timeline.
it now just for that.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it's not. It's kind of ancillary information. It's not like it's
I want it. I need it. I have
no,
to
it's
have it.
awesome. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah,
When I
don't care. Gonna
it
go
gives you
buy it.
like it gives you all of the like profiles of the individual things and sort of like what they're all about, how their government is structured, their like economic strength versus their social strength versus their religious stuff versus whatever, and then there's like a timeline and everything. So yeah, it's just like the amount of thought and energy that went into making this series is phenomenal. But as I said, it's definitely something that I would read more for the big picture and the scope of it rather than for caring about the characters.
Yeah.
So far, my two favorite characters are Wolf and Crow. I really like them a lot. Like, I want a Wolf and Crow commission from Nick Dragotta, like, more than anything in the world. Like, oh my god. I mean, can you imagine that, dude?
Yeah. Crow
Gorgeous.
especially like hits
I
me.
love Crow because she's done in black.
Yeah.
Like, it's like she's like a shadow that's like cut
From
out of
a
the
design
world.
standpoint, she's
Yeah,
so
holy
satisfying.
shit.
Yeah.
So good. Like, so his style, Nick Dragotta's style is at once like very informed by kind of like 70s science fiction European stuff. Like, I see a lot of Mobius in it, in a lot of like the outfits and the way that all of these kind of like pseudo future, it's like if you took, you know, the Western theme of like Confederates in, you know, gray outfits, but then put them into the future, like what would they look like?
Mm-hmm.
And that has like a lot of kind of, like I was saying, especially Mobius, I've seen it, but then at the same time, the motion in his comics is crazy. The amount of dynamic motion that he puts in these things, it kind of reminds me of like manga a little bit. Like the amount of kinetic energy that he has in these characters and their body poses. Like, obviously it's not anatomically close to anything. It's not, I'm not asking it to be, but the amount of like energy and it's just phenomenal. Like the fight scenes and the way that even when they're talking to each other and stuff, the just the dynamism in the expressions and the ability to convey movement in these scenes is staggering. Like, truly staggering.
I'm like so glad you're into it. Because it's one of my favorite things I've read. Planetary is my number one right now, but like East of West for me, like it was the comic that I was like, oh look what they're doing, you know? Like,
and I
this
feel
is,
I feel like
this
if
is
I
a
had
good
not
example.
come to, it's sort of the same thing with like Saga and oh sorry, what was it?
No, I'm done. Go
I was
for
saying
it.
it's sort of the same thing with like Saga and Planetary and stuff, where it's like if I had not come to East of West through these other venues, I could imagine like reading East of West and being like, ah, like, you know, but like really just getting my mind blown from it. And like as it stands, I did come through it through a few other, you know, paths, but I still like hold it up in the same, you know, breadth and equal quality to those things.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, loved it.
Good going through.
So if you're thinking about a Christmas present for me, you know, you can keep a nice little commission sketch in your mind.
I'll get right
just
on
that. Out there for you.
I'm emailing him right now.
Wow, that's great.
Hey Nick, my friend Will's kind of obsessed with you. He thinks your dynamic motion is bonkers.
Exactly, it really is.
Will you draw something? All
So
right.
we're going to audible out of this, and I'm going to say just not even take a
We
break at
can't.
all and
We
just
can't.
close this
We
bad
gotta
boy.
finish it up. Yeah.
We got to do it. It's been crazy. So,
Take us away, Will.
well,
Take
let's
us
do a
home.
quick. So we've been doing 2 hours and 28 minutes. In 2 minutes, can you give me a synopsis of doing this project? Because I found this to be, as we hinted at earlier, and talked about, extremely beneficial for us as not only friends but as like working relationship, understanding where the other person's coming
I
from.
don't
I
feel like
really
we're gonna
like this.
fight anymore. I feel like I know where you're coming from now,
Yeah, I
And
agree. I
like,
think that's
and like, even if we disagree, it's like, well, I get why. Like, it's not for me. It's not for you. Like, there was never anything so completely telling as having to like get into your brain. And like, because it's like when somebody says these are my top 5 favorite things, go watch them, and you don't try and enjoy them, then you're doing yourself a disservice, right? Like putting in the effort to like figure out, okay, what does he like about this? Like, what is it about this that makes it into this list for him? Like that's kind of great, kind of important. It was hard. It was hard to do.
Yeah, and it was for me, it was like interesting and kind of like I was saying, frustrating with a lot of these things where like, because I come at it from a perspective of like caring about character so much.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the things that the perspective that you come at is from the opposite side of like being more concerned with magic systems and world buildings and big ideas and stuff.
Yes,
And
yes,
so
yes.
like putting myself in that mind space, it was, like at first with Studio 60 and stuff, like really frustrating, and like it was hard for me to understand it. But then as I like let these kind of things unfold, I was more open to embracing it, and just like you were saying, not necessarily taking it in as my like, oh, this is my thing now, but definitely understanding where you and I differ in our like criticisms and likes and dislikes. I thought it was quite fascinating.
I think also like we're lucky enough to be kind of polar opposites, so that
But
this kind
still
of
get along in a way
experience,
that's surprisingly like
yeah. I mean, we
easy to
come
do.
together on the comic books at least. At
Yeah.
least there's a one place where we can come
Yeah.
as a whole.
Well,
It's
that was a naughty
interesting.
line.
Shut up. You're the worst. Shut up. All right. I'm done. I feel
I'm done.
I
Now
no
that
longer
we've
feel
come
close to
together,
you.
we are
Last
finished.
podcast.
I was thinking about subtitling this one the breakup podcast because I wasn't sure how.
I thought we were gonna disagree more.
I thought we were too.
We're above such things now. We've matured.
Oh, just wait until the Batman
Oh
conversation.
no, I can't do this with you right now.
I just can't. I can't.
Okay, take us home, Will.
Takes away. So, whew, we made it, guys. Thank you.
We
for
did it.
sticking with us for this whole roller coaster of emotions. Well, we talked about all of these different properties and entities, and thank you for listening every week. We always appreciate any views or watches we get, listens, and all that stuff. We just love you guys as a fan base, and we hope going forward that we can just make it more of a community, make it just an awesome place to consume and talk about nerdy culture with us.
Yeah. Guys, leave a comment. What are your top 5 things?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's make this happen. You can leave those on Will's YouTube page, Nerd Ventures, where the video version of this will be going up. You can also find us on Facebook. Get a Cat, Get a Horse on Facebook and sort of become a part of the community that way. That's another option for you. As always, you can find the audio-only version of this on iTunes, SoundCloud, and other podcasting formats.
Correctamundo. And while you are checking those out, especially the YouTube or iTunes or SoundCloud, if you feel so moved, please, like Amani said, leave us a comment, leave us a rating on iTunes, follow us on SoundCloud, hearts on SoundCloud, whatever it's called, liking it, or posts and shares on Facebook is amazing. If you know somebody that's interested in comics and nerd culture
and has like 16 hours to spare,
yes, and has a lot of time, throw this up on your Facebook page. Please, we beg of you, help us get as many people into the Get a Cat, Get a Horse community as can possibly be.
That's right. Next week on Get a Cat, Get a Horse, we're going to be talking about fan fiction. What is it? How do you define it? Who writes it? Fan fiction is becoming much more mainstream. Very interesting topic. I'm curious to see what goes on with that one. A lot of thoughts, lots of feelings.
I'm ready for you guys to do a 50 Shades of Grey Get a Cat fanfic. Like,
I'm not ready for that.
and you can find us various places on the interwebs. You can find myself as well as all of these podcasts on my YouTube channel, Nerd Ventures, where I will also be doing some Baltimore Comic Con videos and updates and stuff. And you can also find me on Tumblr, Twitter, Facebook, and all that stuff at The Nerd Venturer, where I will be available to talk and chat with you. I try to respond to most things. Sorry if I don't. Where can we find you?
You can find me under the Nomer Nerd How on YouTube, Tumblr, and Twitter. All right, guys. Get a cat.
Get a horse.